Chapter 751. Jun Changshao really didn't put Wu Huang in his eyes. However, the spirit stone lode that was about to be unearthed in the valley, he had to take it for himself no matter what, because it was related to the future development of the sect. Now that the sky above the valley had already spread out and was discovered by outsiders, it was no longer possible to hide like in the Iron Bone Mountain. The only way was to prepare for battle in advance. Just as the elder of the Bright Light Sacred Sect said, it didn't belong to whoever discovered it first, but to whoever had the ability to obtain it. Today, Jun Patriarch wanted to tell the world. Not only did my sect discover the spirit stone lode first, but we also have the ability to obtain it. Anyone who touches it will have to pay a painful price. Shwa! Shwa! Around the valley, array flags were inserted one after another. When the layers of thunder array were set up, the smile on Jin Dejuan's face gradually turned sinister. His two greatest pleasures were eating Lu Wancher's cooking and using array formations to perform the art of explosion. After comprehending the 32 formations, Jin Dejuan's understanding of array formations had reached a new high, and the thunder array he created was even more powerful. If it exploded, it would definitely be as exciting as eating roasted gluten. Come, come. Jin Dejuan covered his face and laughed strangely. Hurry up and come. At the highest point of the valley, Xiao Ziji was wiping the muzzle of the field cannon, and in a short while, it was shiny. He did not cultivate the way of the sword or the way of the blade. However, under the guidance of the Patriarch, he had already fallen in love with this kind of powerful thermal weapon. Although Li Qingyang and Yi Xingchen had been using system items to become stronger, they were still considered normal people from another world in terms of martial arts. Xiao Ziji was definitely a combination of Earth's civilization and martial arts from another world. Jun Changshao sat on a rock, looked at the flowing light that was constantly gathering in the sky, and said, "Sinful self, change the cannonball to the highest level of crystal core." The spirit stone lode was a resource that had to be competed for in the Starfall continent. When the time came, there would definitely be a lot of sects coming. He wanted to shock the crowd with one shot, so that they would know when to advance and retreat, and know when to give up. Yes. Xiao Ziji withdrew the power of the crystal core that had gathered in the field cannon, and then took out dozens of crystal cores that were comparable to peak martial kings. Bring out the rocket launchers as well. Jun Changshao said, if he dares to leap over the lightning pool, we'll blast him down immediately. Shwa! With a wave of his hand, Xiao Ziji summoned the god-modified RPG rocket launcher and began to charge it with crystal cores. The valley was surrounded by lightning arrays. At the highest point, there were field cannons and god-modified RPG launchers. This kind of luxurious defense was not inferior to the level of defense that the horde of beasts used to attack the sect of all times to save the Purple King. At that time, they were fighting against the beast race. This time, they had to face all the major sects and forces. For the lode that was about to be unearthed, Jun Patriarch was not afraid and dared to make the entire world his enemy. Of course. The premise was that there shouldn't be too many people, and they shouldn't come from a sect that was too strong. If he could choose, it would be best if he could. Well, the requirements weren't high, just 4th or 5th rate. This guy wasn't stupid. He knew that the sect's current strength was not enough to go against the entire world. Shwa! Shwa! The Ning brothers, Old Gu, Evil Sage 5 Ultimates, and the Supreme Elders of the Extreme Coldness Palace rushed over from the sect one after another. In order to obtain the spirit stone lode and not allow others to touch it, Jun Changshao had sent out the sect's strongest fighting force. Let me tell you. Little Long Long lay on the stone and glanced at Xiao Moxian, who was in human form. He lightly said, when we fight, don't get in my way. You, Xiao Moxian angrily grabbed the psychic cat and slammed it on the ground. The latter immediately screamed and roared in its heart, she brought me here to vent her anger. However, it felt a little comfortable. The spiritual energy here is about to recover. With the nature of humans, they will definitely rush over. The Purple King held his chin and thought, he made so many disciples be on guard. Is he going to fight with the major sects and forces? This guy was wearing red underwear as usual and the rest of his body was naked. With a head of purple hair and a tall body, he stood in the crowd like a dazzling sand eagle. Junior brother. Li Fei whispered, you're naked all day. It's really against the customs. I have a set of school uniform in my ring. Do you want to wear it first? The Purple King lightly said, no need. It's more comfortable like this. Li Fei's mouth twitched. You're comfortable, but there are many junior sisters here. Can't you pay attention to your image? Who? A cold aura filled the air. The Purple King couldn't help but shiver. He hurriedly turned his head and met Lu Qianqian's eyes. The woman said, put on your clothes. It was just 5 simple words, but it caused the air to become extremely cold. Purple Craggy Demon Monarch shivered from the cold. No. He would catch typhoid. The Purple King looked at Li Fei and lightly said, school uniform, give it to me. Here. After putting on the school uniform, Lu Qianqian retracted the cold aura. The Purple King also felt the warmth. He said warily, this girl is definitely not simple. It had been some time since he joined the Sect of all times. He gradually realized that although his disciple's realm was not high, her aura was very strong. Especially in terms of body molding, she was not inferior to beasts of the same level. It was very strange and very strange. So, he decided to compromise and stay in the Eternal Sect for now, so that he could investigate the situation. Stupid human, remember, I'm not doing this for the food. Hoo. Fluorescent lights constantly rose in the valley and then gradually gathered in the sky, allowing the martial artists in the distant areas to see clearly. The sign of spirit energy recovery. A spirit stone mine is about to be unearthed. Let's go, let's go. In an instant, all the forces in the various provinces and counties who saw the natural phenomenon gathered their forces and rushed over. There were not only 3rd and 4th-rate sects, but also 7th and 8th-rate sections. Of course. The 7th and 8th-rate sects were purely here to watch the show, hoping to accidentally pick up a small bargain. Shush. 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 Streams of light flew out from the luminous holy sect, which was even farther away, toward the place where spirit energy was recovering. The middle-aged man who was knocked down by Jun Changshao had already used a secret method to inform the sect when he was thrown away. That was why they moved so quickly. Sangshan Sect. Ma Yunteng, Wang Donglin, and the others also set off. Miaohua Palace. Zhangsun Fanghua, Leng Xingyue, and the other elders also went down the mountain one after another. The sects in the other provinces and counties also sent martial artists to rush over as fast as they could. The dazzling light flashing in the sky above the valley seemed to contain infinite magic, causing all the forces to rush over without hesitation. This fire. Looking at the brilliant light in the sky, Jun Changshao murmured, it's attracting all the moths. As if realizing that they were about to face all the forces, the disciples of the Sect of all times became excited as if they had been injected with chicken blood. Shush. Shush. 2 hours later, more than 10 Emperor-level experts of the luminous holy sect flew over, but they all stopped when they were about to approach the valley. That was because there were layers of arrays in front of them that were visible to the naked eye and emitting a violent thunder aura. Setting up the array in such an open and above-board manner was also very arrogant. Wu Huang, the leader of the peak-level experts, said in a deep voice, a thunder array. The others' expressions changed slightly. They immediately smelled danger from the arrays set up around the valley. Everyone. Jun Changshao, who was sitting on a boulder, picked up a loudspeaker and said, this place has been occupied by the Sect of all times. No one is allowed to pass, or else they will have to bear the consequences. Sect of all times. Wu Huang, the leader of the peak-level experts, frowned. At this moment, the middle-aged man's weak voice sounded in his ears. After hearing that, the leader of the experts said angrily, Jun Patriarch, you have to give us an explanation for injuring the elders of the luminous holy sect, right? Jun Changshao said with the loudspeaker, I don't like him. Are you satisfied with this explanation? Chapter 752. Seeing that he was unhappy, was this explanation satisfactory? From the anger in the eyes of the experts of the Haoguang sacred sect, it was obvious that they were not satisfied. Jun Changshao. An elder said angrily, do you really think that just because you defeated two first-rate sects in the dragon and tiger battle for hegemony, you can run amok in the falling star continent? Cut the crap. Jun Changshao said impatiently, my sect of all times has taken a fancy to the spirit stone vein. If you want it, then come and snatch it. Simple, direct. Life and death were indifferent, if they were not convinced, then they would do it. However, the dozen or so emperor stage rankers of the Haoguang sacred sect did not dare to rush over. After all, there were too many lightning arrays set up. The strength of a formation master was reflected here. I can't beat you in a fight, but don't let me set up the array, or else I'll fight 10 of you. This was nothing. The one that really brought about the fatal blow was the cannon. Xiao Ziji had already placed the rocket launcher on his shoulder and stepped on the field cannon rack with one foot. As long as someone dared to cross the lightning pool, they would definitely fire at the first moment. Shwa! Shwa! In the distance, several more streams of light flew over and hovered near the lightning array. A total of 4 people came. They wore gold-rimmed clothes and had the word World Pride written on their chests. World-defying sacred sect. Jun Changshao grinned and said, it's quite fate. Jun Changshao. The elder in the lead of the world-defying sacred sect glanced at the lightning array that was set up in the valley and said solemnly, what do you mean by this? Although the dragon and tiger battle for hegemony had always emphasized that the competition was second and friendship was first, El Wushuang was still lying in bed after being tortured by Yi Xingqian. Now that he had met the patriarch of the sect of all times and his disciple in the land of spiritual energy recovery, the fire of dry wood could be ignited at the slightest touch. Jun Changshao said indifferently, this valley has already been occupied by my sect of all times, you can go back how you came. Arrogant. The world-defying sacred sect elder said angrily. Elder Yi. Wu Huang, the leader of the radiant light holy sect, said indifferently, treasures of heaven and earth are ownerless in the first place. What qualifications does the sect of all times have to possess them? He's the champion of Longhu battle for hegemony. Does he really think he's some big shot? Wu Huang said disdainfully. It was undeniable that the sect of all times was able to become the champion and set many records, but they were still not taken seriously by the first and second-rate sections. This was because the sect of all times could completely suppress them in terms of overall strength and foundation. Jun Changshao also understood. Therefore, he needed to increase his strength and increase his foundation. This spirit stone vein was about to be unearthed. No matter what, they had to take it. I'll fight with whoever tries to snatch it from me. Elder Yi of world-defying sacred sect coldly said, Jun Patriarch, this sign of spiritual power recovery will attract all the sects, your sect of all times wants to monopolize, my world-defying sacred sect agrees, they may not agree. He was not stupid. He could hear that the radiant light holy sect was deliberately instigating him to escalate the conflict with the sect of all times. Therefore, he had always restrained his emotions and did not bring anyone to rush forward. Whoever disagrees can come forward. Jun Changshao said. The thunder array and cannons were already in place. The evil saint of 5 treasures and the supreme elder of the extreme cold palace stood on both sides. Not to mention, it was only Wu Huang who came. Even if the martial emperor came, I would immediately slip away without bringing my disciples. The previous sect leader's surname was written backwards. Elder Ye's face gradually darkened, but he suppressed his anger and did not rush over. The Radiant Light Holy Sect was anxious. The leader Wu Huang said, "Elder Yi, is your young patriarch okay? Damn it! Can you not be so obvious? Or could it be that our world-defying sacred sect cultivates the Ao Tianju? Is it the kind of person who is instigated to fight in the front line with a stupid face?" Schwa! Schwa! More Emperor stage rankers flew over from all over the world. Seeing the experts of the Radiant Light Holy Sect and the world-defying sacred sect outside the valley, they hurriedly stopped the carriage. It can't be. The recovery of spiritual energy in such a remote place actually attracted the first and second-rate sects. When they learned that the sect of all times had occupied the valley and set up many thunder arrays, anger immediately rose in their hearts. It wasn't that the falling star continent didn't have any spirit stone mines. According to the rules of the martial arts world, everyone rushed over. No matter who discovered it first, no matter if they robbed it or not, they had to first calmly discuss it. This kind of action of sealing off the area and not letting others in, simply. Did they think of themselves as a first-rate sect? The most ridiculous thing was, a fifth-rate sect was still blocking a first-rate sect outside. How could he be so capable? Why didn't he go to the heavens? The experts of the various sects who came to the valley one after another had a lot of opinions about Jun Changshao, but no one dared to cross the line. They could only use their eyes and words to strongly condemn him. 2 hours later, there were already dozens of sects gathered outside the thunder array, and thousands of martial artists. Ma Yunteng, Wang Donglin, and the others also rushed over. When they learned that the sect of all times had occupied the valley and was confronting so many first-rate, second-rate, third-rate, and third-rate sects, the corners of their mouths twitched violently. Jun Patriarch. You're really tough. Shangguan Fanghua stood in the distance and said speechlessly, "Is this guy crazy?" The recovery of spiritual energy this time has alarmed many first-rate and second-rate sections. He has occupied the valley, which is equivalent to becoming an enemy of all the sects, Ling Xingyue said. Although she said that, her spiritual senses were still spreading in the valley, looking for the man's figure. However, she couldn't find him, and a hint of disappointment rose in her eyes. Who should I look for? Wei Qingfeng. Unfortunately, in this situation, Elder Wei, who was in charge of medicinal materials, wouldn't come over, and there was no need for him because Jun Changshao and the disciples could handle it. The sect of all times now had the ability to compete with the world. Jun Changshao saw Ma Yunteng and the others, but he didn't let them in because he was now confronting dozens of sections. If he let them in, it was equivalent to dragging them into the water. Zhen Dejuan stood behind, feeling itchy in his heart. He could detonate the thunder array at any time, but the powerhouses of the various sects didn't move and could only wait anxiously. Of course. Zhen Dejuan also knew that this seemingly calm situation would be broken after the phenomenon disappeared and the spirit stone vein was unearthed. At that time, he could show off his explosive art to his heart's content. Time passed slowly, and more forces rushed over. The next day, the number of people had reached more than 100,000. The first echelon closest to the array formation was made up of first-rate and second-rate sects, the second echelon was made up of third-rate and fourth-rate sects, and the fifth-rate sects and those sects were at the outermost periphery. They were completely there to watch the show. At this moment, the martial artists of the low-level sects were full of admiration for the sect of all times. How much courage did it take to occupy the place where spiritual energy had recovered and go against so many powerful sects? The light is weakening. Suddenly, someone shouted. The martial artists at the periphery of the valley raised their heads and saw the light gathering in the sky begin to disperse and disappear. At the same time, they could feel a faint tremor. Whoosh whoosh, after a while, the ground inside the valley cracked open, and pure heaven and earth attributes filled the air. This meant that this place had officially entered the stage of spiritual energy recovery. According to experience, as long as they dug deep along the location where the spiritual energy was emitted, they would definitely be able to find the spirit stone vein. The phenomenon of heaven and earth weakened, and when the pure heaven and earth attributes emerged in the valley, the powerhouses outside became restless. Everyone. The leader of the bright light sacred sect, Wu Huang, shouted, "The spirit stone vein is in the valley, follow this old man to break the thunder array." Unable to instigate the world-defying sacred sect, he finally couldn't help but want to force his way out. After all, the sect was in urgent need of spirit stones recently and needed new veins to replenish. This guy was also very smart. If he wanted to go, he would have to drag the other sects along. Elder Yi of the world-defying sacred sect was calmer and thought, "Whoever wants to go, my world-defying sacred sect will never go." The others also thought so, but they were still afraid of the thunder array. Sigh. Their hearts were not united. If they were to risk their lives and rush up together, they would definitely be able to abuse Jun Gosheng. After the bright light sacred sect elder shouted, no one responded. A gust of wind blew over, and it suddenly seemed quite lonely and awkward. A bunch of cowards. He cursed in his heart, then turned into a stream of light and flew high into the sky, obviously to cross the thunder array. For safety's sake, he turned his palm. Xiao. Xiao. A prop similar to the 5 elements 8 trigrams appeared out of thin air and gathered layers of defensive enchantments in front of him. 5 elements heaven and earth cover. This is infinitely close to the sacred rank. Pang, just as everyone was discussing, a deafening roar suddenly came from the valley. They only saw a stream of light exploding out, and then it accurately hit the bright light sacred sect elder, producing thick white smoke that covered the sky. Ga. The audience was silent. Xiao. After a while, the bright light sacred sect elder fell from the smoke. Ka. Xiao Ziji, who was standing at a high point, put down the rocket launcher, continued to charge the shell with crystal core, and transmitted, "Patriarch, the target has been shot down." Chapter 753. Plop. Like a kite with its string cut, the elder of the radiant light sacred sect wobbled and fell into the mountain forest outside the lightning formation. The 5 elements universe cover he summoned also fell and shattered into pieces after falling to the ground. Outside the thunder array, it became quiet. All the martial artists widened their eyes and even subconsciously rubbed their eyes to make sure they didn't see wrongly. They didn't see wrongly. The peak stage Wu Huang was indeed blasted down. He was bruised all over and fainted on the spot. His ultimate treasure, which was infinitely close to the holy grade, was also shattered. The martial artists who were shocked by the ultimate treasure now had wonderful expressions on their faces. The most tragic thing in the world was that passers-by like them were trying hard to show off their shock, but before the atmosphere could be set, the performer had already finished his curtain call. The emperor's presence suddenly felt a chill down their spines. They were sure that the luminous light holy sect elder must have been blasted by the flowing light. What on earth was that thing? It could ignore the ultimate treasure and the realm and blast a peak stage Wu Huang into such a miserable state. Elder He. Several martial artists of the luminous light holy sect flew over and lifted He Chunching up. Although he was injured and unconscious, it wasn't a big deal. Fortunately, he had cautiously activated his defensive ultimate treasure. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to withstand the bombardment of the rocket launcher. At the very least, he would have been seriously injured. Sigh. The Purple King shook its head. It sympathized with the luminous light holy sect elder very much because it had not only experienced the feeling of being blasted personally, but also experienced it every day for a period of time. This is the fate of those who cross the thunder pool without permission. Jun Changxiao's voice came out. Although it was very calm, it was intimidating. The martial artists of the various sects who didn't want to rush over all stood still obediently after seeing the luminous light holy sect elder being blasted down. Although they desperately wanted to enter the valley and find the spirit stone vein, the huge noise just now calmed their restless blood. Calm down. They must calm down. This is very comfortable. Seeing that no one dared to approach, Jun Changshao smiled. He didn't want to be enemies with the whole world. He just wanted to occupy the spirit stone vein and develop his sect. If the various sects could retreat, it would be a happy ending. Who? In the valley, the ground was still cracking, and gradually, the most natural spirit chi recovery array was formed. Jun Patriarch recalled the time when he was at Mount Iron Bone. In order to not be discovered by outsiders, he had to manipulate the isolation array formation to last for 7 days. Just thinking about it made him feel like crying. Patriarch. Li Qingyang said in a low voice, it won't be long before this place becomes a place with good feng shui. Yes. Jun Changshao responded. He only cared about the spirit stone vein and had no interest in the forest that was about to become a feng shui treasure land. Therefore, his eyes were fixed on the cracked ground. After a while, the cracks in the ground gradually stopped. Jun Changshao immediately announced, dig out the veins. Yes. Li Qingyang led his fellow sect members into the valley. They either used shovels or sharp blades to start digging. Because their strength was not bad, their digging speed was extremely fast. The experts of the various sects who were outside saw it clearly with their spiritual senses. Their desire to rush over grew stronger. Jun Patriarch. Elder Yi said in a deep voice, do you really want to monopolize the spirit stone vein? That's right. Jun Changshao said. Elder Yi said, there's no room for negotiation at all. From the way he clenched his fists, it could be seen that he was trying his best to control his emotions. The experts of the other sects were the same. As Li Qingyang and the others dug deeper and deeper, that strong impulse was almost uncontrollable. This place was discovered by my sect of all times, and I have the ability to mine it. Why would I need to discuss it with you? Jun Changshao said. Jun Patriarch. Elder Yi suppressed his impulse and said, everyone has a share, my world-defying sacred sect is not greedy, as long as it's 50,000 spirit stones, what do you think? He could also see that the sect of all times was determined to occupy the vein today. He could only take a step back and share the profits from it. Ha ha ha. Jun Changshao raised his head and laughed, and said, this elder, I would like to ask, when your world-defying sacred sect discovered the vein before, did you also take out the ore and give it to others? No. You group of pretentious, sanctimonious sects, keep saying that the treasures of heaven and earth are ownerless. Which one of you doesn't want to take it for yourself? Which one of you doesn't think you deserve to have it? Why should I give you all the good things? Why should we, the low-level sects, have to endure the arrogance of your big sects? Why? Pfft. Jun Patriarch was a little agitated, especially when he said the word based. Because of the emphasis on the word, his saliva immediately flew everywhere. Zhen Dejuan wiped his face with his hand and took 2 steps back, so as not to be accidentally injured by Patriarch again. Elder Yi was silent. The martial artists who were standing the furthest away felt their blood boil when they heard this. If they weren't here to watch the show, they probably wouldn't be able to control their emotions and shouted, that's right, why? Very good answer. Because they were stronger. But today, the sect of all times has occupied the valley, and you don't dare to take a step forward. Why should you share the ores? You big sects have 2 mouths, one open and the other closed. Is everything reasonable? Old man. Jun Changshao pointed at Elder Yi and said coldly, I'll say it here today. Anyone who dares to take half a step forward will have to pay a painful price. Too arrogant. An emperor expert said loudly, everyone, this is just a 5th-rate sect. Can't we break the lightning array and take care of it if we work together? That's right. Someone supported. The Sect of All Time's disciples were digging deeper and deeper, and the ore vein would appear soon. At this time, the martial artists of the first-rate and second-rate sects couldn't suppress the urge to rush over. He Chunqing was still too impatient. If he could hold it in until now, he could easily pull everyone into an uprising. Elder Yi said in a deep voice, Jun Changshao, your Sect of All Times wants to monopolize the Spirit Stone mine. We won't agree. If you insist on being stubborn, you have to be prepared to pay a painful price. Huff huff. As he spoke, his cultivation base burst out. The 3 Wu Huang experts who came with him also released their realms. The martial artists of the Radiant Light Holy Sect and the other high-level sects also released their full cultivation base. For a time, the space outside the lightning array gathered a terrifying spiritual energy field. Everyone! Elder Yi shouted angrily, charge over with me. Huff huff. Explosive spiritual energy was released again. Jun Changshao lowered his head and rubbed his fingers. Flames rose and lit the cigar hanging in his mouth. He took a deep breath and said, fire. Bang! A deafening explosion rang out. Boom! A mushroom cloud rose in the area outside the lightning array, and the entire ground shook violently. The martial artists of the outermost sect were shocked. They covered their buzzing ears and retreated frantically. Soon, the clouds dissipated. Looking down from the sky, the originally empty forest had been blown into a giant pit. Even the edge of the forest was barren. Elder Yi and the others who were ready to charge opened their eyes wide and their ears perked up. Huff! Jun Changshao blew a smoke ring and said, come if you're not afraid of death. Jun Patriarch. An Emperor stage expert suppressed the shock in his heart and cupped his hands. Sorry for the disturbance. Goodbye. 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 Many Emperor stage experts of the second and third-rate sects left faster than when they came. Gulp. Elder Yi swallowed and hurriedly left with his 3 companions. Before he left, he glanced at the deep pit not far away. The shock in his heart was even more intense. Although the cannon had intentionally missed its target, it had still intimidated the crowd. The sects who had the idea and impulse all fled. The Spirit Stone mine was important, but their lives were more important. Besides, with the destructive power just now, if it had hit the crowd, it would have killed a lot of them. Patriarch. The mine has been dug out. Take it all away. Don't leave a single one behind. Yes. Patriarch, this mine is a little big. I'm afraid it won't be finished in 1 or 2 days. Inform the sects to send more disciples to help. Yes. The martial artists who had no interest in the Spirit Stone mine heard the conversation between Jun Changshao and the disciples in the valley, and their eyes were filled with envy. Chapter 754. Once the field cannon was fired, the experts of the various sects who had their own ideas were all scared away. The main thing was that those who came were all at the Emperor level. That kind of explosive power and lethality were too great, so they didn't have the guts to fight head-on. Without any hindrance, Jun Changshao mobilized more disciples to start mining. Batches of natural spirit stones were transported out and stored in his interspatial ring. The low-level sects and martial artists standing at the periphery could only watch helplessly. The first-rate sects had already suffered a loss, so why were they still here? Did they really think that they could be lucky enough to pick up a bargain? For someone like Jun Changshao who entered Death Valley, he had to ask for money from the rogue cultivators. How could he leave a little thing for others to pick up? In fact, they weren't waiting to pick up the leftovers, but waiting to see how the large sects would take their next step. Especially the Bright Light Holy Sect. Their own elder had been blasted unconscious. Not to mention the Spirit Stone vein, it was extremely difficult for them to swallow this anger. There was also the second-rate world-defying holy sect. How could they watch a spirit stone vein be dug up by the fifth-rate sect of all times? Just wait. There would definitely be a good show to watch. Perhaps it won't be long before an emperor-level expert appears. At that time, would the sect of all times obediently admit defeat or fight head-on? Jun Changshao also knew that the few large sects would not let this matter rest, so he ordered his disciples to hurry up and dig out the spirit stones. For this reason, he didn't hesitate to order Xiao Moxian to transform into the Black Eagle form of the Demon Ridge and go to the sect to call for the Lanxiang excavator specialist Peppa the Wild Boar. Hurry up and go down. Jun Changshao held the green dragon crescent blade in his hand, and a terrifying aura surrounded his body, as if he had turned into a demon god. Coo. Peppa the Wild Boar drilled into the mine at the speed of reincarnation and dug out the spirit stones with the disciples. To be exact, it was the one digging. Everyone was watching. Because after this guy released the earth element psionic energy, it quickly decomposed the soil and minerals, and the spirit stones flew out one by one. The speed was so fast that the disciples couldn't get involved at all. Oh my God! Li Fei said with his eyes wide open, this digging is too fast. It was more than fast. It was super fast. In just an hour, the amount of natural spirit stones dug out was enough for several thousand disciples to dig out for an entire day. Those disciples who cultivated the five elements heavenly reflection mantra and comprehended the earth elemental attribute were extremely embarrassed because they had tried to dig as well, but their digging speed was completely incomparable to Peppa Wild Boar's. The attributes that humans condense through acquired or martial arts could not be compared to the attributes of beasts that they were born with. Unfortunately, after becoming Jun Changxiao's contracted beast, Peppa Wild Boar's attributes were stimulated to the extreme, but its main function was to plow and build. Now, it had unlocked a new skill: mining. Shwa. 2 hours later, Peppa the Wild Boar had dug out 200,000 natural spirit stones. At this rate, they would be able to obtain millions of natural spirit stones after digging for a day and a night. Awesome! Awesome! Jun Changxiao's eyes blazed. This was a resource that could help his disciples improve their strength faster. Not to mention a few million, even if it was a few 100 billion, he wouldn't think it was too little. At this moment, Jun Changxiao's eyes looked into the distance. 3 streams of light were rapidly approaching from a few 100 miles away. Under the eruption of their heavy aura, even the space was violently shaking. Half-step Wuxia. The evil saint of 5 ultimate said. The supreme elder of the extreme coldness palace had a solemn expression. Judging from the heavy aura of these 3 half-step Wuxia, they were definitely stronger than him. In fact, the supreme elder of the extreme coldness palace was able to break through to the half-step Wuxia because of his own hard work and talent. However, the key was still luck. This was because in the entire continent, there were very few martial artists who could reach this level. Because it was a coincidental breakthrough, his strength couldn't be compared with the half-step Wuxia of the first-rate and second-rate sections. As expected, they still haven't given up. Jun Changxiao shook his head and said. He could guess that these 3 half-step Wuxia must be related to the luminous light sacred sect and the world-defying sacred sect. This is a little troublesome. Zhen Dejuan frowned slightly. With his current thunder array, he could only blow up the emperor level and half-step Wuxia, unless the other party merged into the central area. However, any expert with a bit of brain wouldn't rush in. Moreover, with their strength, even if they couldn't directly break the array, they could still directly fly over. Be on guard. Jun Changxiao said coldly. Who? Little Long Long, who was lying on the stone, stood up. Its eyes were filled with a strong fighting spirit. Its smooth skin became increasingly red, and one could vaguely see an additional scale on its neck. Xiao Moxian stood in front of its master, waving its hands. The psychic cat flew around like a ball, and a circle of small stars suddenly appeared on top of its head. However, it was also painful and happy. The two contracted beasts had already entered battle mode. Xiao Ziji, who was standing on top of the mountain, stepped on the field artillery with one foot and carried the rocket launcher on his shoulder. Jun Changshao said, "Activate the special effect mode." Yes. Xiao Ziji's spiritual sense entered the rocket launcher and established some kind of connection with it. Xiao. Xiao. 3 spots of light instantly appeared in the scope. The crosshair constantly shook and frequently changed targets, as if waiting for the user to lock onto it. Only Jun Changshao could activate the self-aiming and X-ray function of the modified 8X scope. However, any disciple of the Sect of all times could activate the special effect of the godly modified rocket launcher. The key point. Sect of all times disciple. Half-step Wuxia had already grasped the power of space. His perception was very strong. Just relying on the rocket launcher might not be able to hit him. It was still necessary to activate the precise strike special effect. Whoosh whoosh around the valley, a strong pressure spread out, causing the low-level sects and martial artists who had yet to leave to change their expressions. Xiao! 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 Suddenly, the space outside the thunder array shook. 3 old men with imposing auras seemed to appear out of thin air. 2 of them were wearing the same clothes, and one of them was wearing a grey robe. "They're here, they're here." From their clothes, the martial artists immediately realized that these were definitely experts of the luminous light holy sect and the world-defying holy sect. From the oppressive aura that pervaded the air, their strength was definitely above the emperor stage. Then, they were half-step Wuxia. Oh my god! This kind of expert belonged to the quasi-top level in the falling star continent, and there were actually 3 of them. They still came. The corner of Ma Yinteng's mouth twitched. Wang Donglin said solemnly, "Although Jun Patriarch has a powerful ability to increase his cultivation, a first-rate and second-rate sect's half-step Wuxia is definitely not comparable to a fourth-rate sect." Zhangsun Fanghua shook her head and said, "At that time, we adopted the world-defying holy sect's elder's suggestion to give them tens of thousands of spirit stones. How could it alarm 3 half-step Wuxia? Jun Changshao." At this moment, a half-step Wuxia of the luminous light holy sect said in a deep voice, "You're quite bold to injure my sect's elder." The pressure from his words shook the thunder array in the valley violently. Zhen Dejuan suddenly frowned. The half-step Wuxia of a large sect was really amazing. The power that came with his words could shake the array that he had arranged. If they were to fight, it would be very difficult to detonate it. Cut the crap. Standing on the boulder, Jun Changshao stretched out his hand and hooked his index finger, "Come at me." Chapter 755. The scale of the newly unearthed lode was not small, and there were a lot of spirit stones stored inside. If all of them were dug out, it would definitely be a huge fortune for the sect of all times, and their overall strength would definitely increase by a lot. Therefore, even if the Haoguang sacred sect sent 2 half-step Wuxia and the world-defying sacred sect sent 1 half-step Wuxia, Jun Changshao would never back down. He had to fight them to the end. Riches and honor were found in danger. If he did not succeed, he would die. Jun Changshao learned from the vice-sect leader of the Shutter Gate, combining the one yang finger and the lion roar technique into one move. He hooked his finger and said, "Bring it on." Everyone's mouth twitched. In the dragon and tiger battle for hegemony, they had seen Jun Changshao's thick skin, but today they had also seen his thick courage. Those were 3 genuine half-step Wuxia, daring to use such a cheap and provocative tone. In the entire falling star continent, they might not be able to find a second person. Jun Changshao would not underestimate the experts of the 2 first and second-rate sects, but since things had reached this point, he definitely could not weaken the momentum. In short, regardless of whether he could beat them or not, he would first act tough. Next, whether he squatted down and took a beating or ran away, he would do as he pleased. Moreover, isn't it just 3 half-step wuxing? Although my sect of all times only has one, I have 2 contract beasts, the 5 ultimate evil saint, a rocket launcher, and myself, a 7th grade sword and martial double emperor. If we really fight, we still have the qualifications to wrestle. This kid is really arrogant. The expert from the world-defying sacred sect said coldly. Humph. An expert from the Haoguang sacred sect said disdainfully, young people nowadays have a little fame in the Jianghu, and they don't know what their surname is. The half-step wuxing who spoke earlier glanced at the thunder array in front of him and said indifferently, do you really think you can be fearless by putting this kind of thing around? I'll break it. The expert next to him took a step forward in the void, and his body instantly filled with a powerful semi-sage pressure, which immediately pressed down like a tide. Whing! Whing! As the overwhelming pressure spread out, the lightning array that existed around the valley was suddenly squeezed, and the barrier began to distort. Jin Dejuan had been trying to stabilize the lightning array, but he was still unable to contend against the boundless power. Beads of sweat gradually appeared on his forehead, and his entire face was distorted. Boom! 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 In the end, it was difficult to stabilize, and all the lightning arrays that had been set up around the valley exploded. Streaks of lightning splattered out and stirred up clouds of dust. The martial artists standing in the distance all widened their eyes. They knew that there was a lightning array in front of them, and they also knew that they would definitely be blown up if they went in. However, they didn't expect that the explosion from the perspective of a bystander would have such a strong visual impact. Pooh! Jin Dejuan spat out a mouthful of blood as he clutched his chest and took a few steps back. His complexion became extremely weak. Although the explosion of the array formation displayed its artistic side, it did not directly detonate, nor did it hurt the target. Instead, it was squeezed until it exploded, which made him very unhappy and unwilling to accept it. Damn it! Just you wait. Once he had thoroughly studied the Chiman 32 formations, he would definitely create an even more advanced thunder formation and blast away all of you high and mighty half-step wuxing. The dust was blown away by the wind, forming a fist-deep crater in the periphery of the valley. The inside of the crater could be seen clearly with the naked eye. Jun Changshao stood on a huge rock. Some disciples of the sect of all times took out their weapons and guarded the entrance. The most eye-catching thing was the field artillery placed on the high ground and a rocket launcher on Xiao Ziji's shoulder. The smart martial artists immediately thought that the bright light holy sect's elder and the huge crater must have been caused by these 2 items. To be able to severely injure Wu Huang at his peak and explode with such great destructive power, they must be at least saint-grade ultimate treasures. Jun Changshao. The half-step wuxing who had broken the lightning array said lightly, seeing that your sect has not risen easily in such a short period of time, the bright light holy sect will not pursue the previous grievances if you hand over the 2 items and the spirit stone mine on the mountain. When he came, he had already heard from the awakened He Chunqing that he had been hit by the strange big guy on the high ground. Therefore, he was sure that the item was definitely extraordinary. It would be good if he could obtain it. Heh. Jun Changshao interlocked his fingers and said, spirit stones are no longer enough to satisfy your first-class sect. Are you ready to rob others? You don't want to hand it over. Cut the crap. Bring it on. Not to mention that he was not riding a horse, the half-step wuxing could not tolerate his tone. Whoosh! He flew over and stopped in the explosion area of the lightning array. He raised his hand and said, you refuse a toast only to drink a forfeit. Huff huff, a vast amount of spiritual energy instantly gathered in his palm and formed a cyclone. The spiritual energy in the surroundings was also driven and turned into streams of light that surged over. At that moment, with the valley as the center, a murderous aura was emitted from dozens of miles away. Many martial artists who were watching the show became nervous. The fight has begun. That's a half-step Wuxia. The power he unleashes must be earth-shattering. Although everyone was scared and wanted to retreat, the desire to see a battle between experts drove them to stay where they were and ignore the possibility of being affected. Are you handing it over or not? The half-step Wuxia asked again. After all, they were a major sect and there were so many spectators watching. Bullying a fifth-rate sect was too degrading. If they could make the other party admit their mistake and hand over the treasure, they could gain a reputation of being magnanimous. Ding! Side mission triggered. A mission at this time, could it be? Sure enough, when he opened the system interface, the mission was, host must personally defeat a half-step Wuxia 01 elite mission. What the fuck? Jun Changshao was on the verge of breaking down. It was a bit difficult for him to defeat a half-step Wuxia. Moreover, the appearance of the mission meant that he had to change from passive defense to active attack. This way, the situation was different. Hand it over, my ass. Jun Changshao stood up and unfolded his wings. He clenched his right fist. Hum. Hum. A stream of light instantly lingered around his body and then gradually condensed into an iron armor. The whole process was as if he was wearing a holy garment. Huff huff. Spiritual energy spread out from his body and covered the iron armor. It was as if he was wearing another layer of armor on the surface. Bang! The green dragon crescent blade appeared out of thin air and smashed the bottom of the blade on the stone surface. The mechanical wings flying, combat, and defense modes were all activated. Together with the enhancement of the spirit armor, he also took out the god-modified weapon. At this moment, Jun Patriarch was really going all out in order to complete the side mission. Huh! The half-step Wuxia were surprised. This eternal sect sovereign, whether it was the armor he wore or the weapon in his hand, even a casual glance would tell that they were not simple. His entire body was definitely a treasure. Of course. With the system in his hands, Jun Patriarch was a gamer. Although the three half-step Wuxia standing opposite him were strong, they did not even have the first charge. At best, they were just gamers. Since you don't want to hand it over, don't blame me for bullying you in public. The powerhouse who was ready to attack shouted coldly. Huff! In an instant, the cyclone gathered in his palm suddenly rippled with energy. A beam of light burst out from it and blasted toward the fully armed Jun Changshao. This move gathered his own strength and the power of heaven and earth. It seemed to have the power to penetrate space and deeply shocked the spectators in the distance. Mountain splitting. Jun Changshao raised the green dragon crescent blade and slashed toward the beam of light. With the enhancement of the combat transformation on his right hand, a dazzling and extremely thick blade aura was dragged out. Whoosh! The blade aura that seemed to be able to pierce through 19 continents collided with the beam of light and tore it apart. Swoosh! Jun Changshao held the blade and tore the beam of light like a piece of cloth. With the enhancement of the mechanical wings, he rushed toward the half-step Wuxia in an instant. Not good. Ding! At this moment, the crisp sound of weapons colliding was heard. The powerful force directly shattered the space in that area. Whoosh 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 whoosh. A half-broken sword flew out and stabbed into a giant rock in the distance. Under the sunlight, the word fan could be seen engraved on the edge of the broken part. This is a sword made by Master Fan. Everyone looked up and saw that the half-step Wuxia had retreated dozens of feet. The sword in his hand was broken in half. Chapter 756. Even though Master Fan had never appeared before, the weapons he forged were very popular. The broken sword in the hand of the half-step Wuxia from the Bright Light Holy Sect was once forged by him. In terms of quality, it had already reached the sacred level. However, before the name was even given, and before the extras had the chance to shock the atmosphere, the curtain call had already been completed. My sword! The half-step Wuxia held the famous sword that he had spent a lot of effort and money to obtain. His hands could not help but tremble, and his eyes were filled with sadness and indignation. The sword forged by Master Fan not only represented excellence, but also elegance. If the upper class could get one, even if their level was not high, it was enough to show off in front of people for a lifetime. A sacred level sword was even more precious to collectors and users. How could they accept the fact that it was broken? Not to mention whether Master Fan was still alive or not, just the fact that the weapon he forged was destroyed by Jun Changshao again and again to create an atmosphere for him to show off. It was a tragedy that only the weapon was seen but not the person. You destroyed my sword. The half-step Wuxia raised his head, and his eyes flashed with monstrous anger. Unforgivable. Whoosh whoosh, in an instant, a strong aura emerged from his body and pressed down on Jun Changshao. Obviously, he wanted to use his huge advantage in realm to forcefully bind him. In a battle between a high realm and a low realm, this was undoubtedly the simplest and most direct way. However, even the pressure of the upper realm's palm print could not penetrate Gosheng. How could a half-step Wuxia do it? Shua! He held the green dragon crescent blade and rushed up against the aura. His armed right arm suddenly shone brightly, and endless power poured into the blade, causing the blade engraved with a green dragon to suddenly burst out with a momentum that could shatter space. Ka ka ka, he went forward, lightning and sparks all the way. Jun Changshao at full power was absolutely terrifying. Whoosh! At this moment, the entire blade emitted a green light and condensed into a long-bearded green shadow. It said in a loud voice, "I am Guan Yunchang, the Marquis of Hans Ho Ting." This voice revealed a righteous momentum, shocking the hearts of the distant audience. Some warriors who came together even had the impulse to kneel down and swear brotherhood with their friends under the witness of the green shadow. Phantom Soul. The two half-step Wuxia were astonished. Swish! At this moment, Jun Changshao rushed over with the support of Wuxia's soul. He stood above the expert and furiously slashed down with his saber. Saber chi traverses 30,000 miles, one saber light chills 19 continents. Hu! The heavy cyan saber chi slashed down from above, tearing the space apart. The entire world seemed to have lost its color in an instant. It was as if everything had turned silent, and only young Master Jun's saber remained. Ka ka ka, space shattered, leaving behind a saber mark. The eyes of the half-step Wuxia, who was hanging below, were filled with astonishment. How could this guy ignore his chi domain? How could he explode with such power? There was no time for him to think. He suddenly raised his palms to the sky, and dense spiritual energy burst out, instantly forming a solid defensive barrier in the sky. Boom! With a loud bang, the cyan blade slashed the barrier. An extremely strong destructive force instantly penetrated the barrier, causing it to shatter on the spot. Swish! The half-step Wuxia retreated quickly. Boom! The remaining power of the saber chi slammed directly on the ground, and the half-step Wuxia broke out in cold sweat. With the power just now, if he couldn't dodge it in time, he would definitely be injured directly, or even cut in half. A young man at the martial emperor realm could actually make him, a half-step martial saint, feel a sense of crisis. Then, his weapons and equipment were too awesome. Swish! Jun Changshao took the green dragon crescent blade and stimulated Wuxia's soul to attack again. At this moment, he had obviously suppressed his opponent in terms of momentum. He definitely wouldn't give his opponent a chance to breathe. Boom! Boom! The two instantly launched a fierce battle in the sky that lasted for tens of thousands of words. About 10 minutes later, Jun Changshao slashed his saber again. Although the half-step Wuxia dodged it with difficulty, there was still a saber mark on his arm, and blood spurted out. If one looked carefully, there were more than 10 saber marks on his body. It was obvious that he had been slashed a lot during the battle. Huff! Huff! The half-step Wuxing's breathing was slightly hurried. He roared in his heart, why is he still so energetic? This young man was wearing a full set of top-tier equipment. After a long battle, his physical strength would become weaker and weaker. However, after fighting for more than 10 minutes, he had tried his best to dodge the saber chi and had been slashed so many times. It was obvious that he was in a sorry state. However, the more he fought, the stronger his opponent became. Dual core drive allowed a man to last longer. Swish! Jun Changshao rushed over again. This time, he gathered his strength on the green dragon crescent blade and slashed out a saber chi that tore the space apart. The power was even stronger than before. The half-step Wuxing didn't dare to take the attack head-on. He could only retreat again until he was side by side with his two companions. He panted and said, if you don't go, all the spiritual stones in the mine will be dug out. He was scared. He didn't dare to continue fighting. Ding! Side mission completed. Congratulations to the host for obtaining 10,000 contribution points. Ding! Contribution points, 300, 015, 0000. Ding! Congratulations to the host for completing the side mission. Mission reward, New Seal Talisman X1, Purchase Right of Heavenly Treasure Incubator X1. Jun Changshao, who was about to attack, suddenly stopped after hearing the notification. He said with a stunned face, it's done. The system said, that guy was beaten and ran away. He even instigated his companions to attack. The system determined that you have defeated him. I see. Jun Changshao suddenly understood. His face was filled with ecstasy. The side mission was rewarded with a new seal talisman. Wouldn't he be able to activate the modified hard-to-keep saber? The saber given by the first wish had been modified for some time. However, because the old one couldn't be unsealed, he had never used it. So, he didn't know how powerful it was. Swish! Jun Changshao returned to the huge rock in the valley. Holding the green dragon crescent blade in front of him, he said coldly, if you can't win, you let your companions come. Is this the style of a second-rate sect? With the new seal talisman, he was able to straighten his back even more. Swish! Swish! The two experts of the Haoguang Sacred Sect and the world-defying Sacred Sect ignored him and flew towards the valley. Just now, the half-step Wuxing reminded the two of them and decided to take down the spirit stone vein first. Fight! Jun Changshao shouted. Xiao Ziji, who had already activated the special effects, controlled the aiming device, locked onto the world-defying Sacred Sect expert flying at the front, and decisively pulled the trigger. Bang! White smoke spewed out of the muzzle, and the cannonball exploded out of the air, still spinning as it rushed past. When the martial artists in the distance saw this, they were sure that the elder Wu Huang of the Haoguang Sacred Sect must have been blasted down by this thing. The locked half-step Wuxing caught the spatial fluctuations, and the corner of his mouth raised in disdain. Immediately, as if he had used a flash skill, he flashed to the top of the valley. Hoo! A vast amount of psionic energy erupted, and then crazily spread down. What he had to do now was to seal off the valley, not allowing the disciples of the sect of all times to enter, and not allowing them to leave. Be careful. At this moment, the expert of the Haoguang Sacred Sect behind him shouted. The half-step Wuxing's spiritual sense spread out and found that the flowing light in the distance had suddenly turned a corner in the area he had just passed through. Don't panic. No hurry. Watch me continue to cross the space. Xiao. The expert of the world-defying Sacred Sect calmly merged into the space, and then appeared in the position before the first flash, the corner of his mouth raised into a smile. Boom! Suddenly, an explosion came from that area, and thick smoke appeared, like the traces left behind by an oversized firework. Hoo! A gust of wind blew, and the white smoke dissipated. The expert of the world-defying sacred sect was suspended in mid-air, his entire body was blown up into an abnormally sorry state, and his bundled hair was scattered messily. The power of the god-modified bazooka could knock out a peak Wu Huang like He Chunsheng, but it couldn't shake the half-step Wu Sheng, so it only caused damage and didn't bring any substantial damage. However, it was shameful enough. After all, under the watchful eyes of the crowd, he still couldn't dodge out and was hit. It was simply embarrassing and shameful. Schwa! Schwa! On the other side, the great elder of the extreme cold palace and the evil saint of 5 treasures had already flown out and were above the valley, blocking the other half-step Wusheng. The two sides slightly confirmed their gazes and instantly tangled together. In terms of strength, the great elder of the extreme cold palace couldn't fight against this kind of powerhouse, but with the assistance of the evil saint of 5 treasures, who used to be Wu Xing's cultivation, there was no pressure at all. Boom! Boom! The 3 of them fought fiercely in the air, and the space was shattered by the explosion of psionic energy. Schwa! Schwa! Zhen Dejuan frequently waved the array flag and inserted it into the valley. An isolation array from the Strange Gate 32 formation quickly condensed, blocking the remaining power so as not to affect the spirit stone mine below. Little Dragon, Xiao Maxian. Jun Changshao pointed to the half-step sage who had been bombed, and said, "I'll leave this person to you too." Schwa! Little Dragon was the first to rush over. Hoo-hoo! Scorching flames spread out, and then an innocent young man's face appeared, saying, "I can do it myself." Pang! Xiao Maxian pressed the spiritual cat's face against a stone, fiercely rubbing against it. "Is he looking down on me? Big sister. I don't know if he's looking down on you or not, but what I do know is that you're trying to kill me." Schwa! The spiritual cat was flung away. A pair of wings appeared behind Xiao Maxian's back, and then she flew up at full speed. Bang! Little Dragon had already begun fighting with the half-step sage. He angrily shouted, "Woman, hurry up and get out of my way." "I won't." Xiao Maxian flew high up, her black wings wrapping around her. The space in front of her shook and shimmering feathers appeared out of thin air. She said, "Sky-filling feathers." Schwa! Her wings spread open, and the feathers shot out like arrows towards the half-step sage. Little Dragon, who had just exchanged a punch with the half-step sage, looked back, his face crumbling as he roared, "Pig teammate." Bang! 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 Numerous explosions rang out, and the space was torn apart, spreading in all directions. As the martial artists saw this, they sucked in a breath of cold air. A battle of this level was truly shocking. Bang! At this time, there was a loud explosion in the skies above the valley. Another half-step sage was sent flying away. He staggered to steady himself, his clothes torn apart and a black palm mark imprinted on his skin. Young man. Evil Saint 5 Ultimate's right hand emitted a black aura. His eyes were gloomy and cold as he said, "If this were in the past, this palm of mine would have left you in so much pain that you wished you were dead." The half-step sage of the Radiant Light Holy Sect used his spiritual energy to rapidly dissolve the evil energy that had seeped into his body. His expression was dignified as he said, "So you were an evil cultivator. Sky-filling feathers." At this time, on the other side, Xiao Maxian seemed to go berserk with anger. She gathered her wings together once more, and as they unfurled, a rain of feathers shot out. Little Dragon's lips twitched, but he had already dodged. He angrily said, "Woman, you're just a hindrance." Schwa! After the feather attack ended, the strongest flames gathered and shot towards the half-step sage. Bang! Bang! In the air, monstrous flames soared to the heavens. Fist seals and strength wildly crashed outwards. The half-step sage was first struck once and then struck twice by Xiao Maxian. Although his injuries weren't fatal, he couldn't avoid being affected. He was immediately entangled by Little Dragon. Of the two half-step sages, one was entangled by a contract beast and the other was entangled by the Extreme Coldness Palace's highest elder and evil Saint 5 Ultimates. As for the other one, he was naturally entangled by June Patriarch. One could only see him unleash his full power once more, grasping the blue dragon crescent blade as he rushed forwards. Bang! Bang! In the valley area, the three battlefields frequently displayed powerful battles. The distant audience didn't know which to watch. Xiao Ziji was also tangled up. This was because after reloading the cannonballs, he didn't know which target to aim at. Senior 5 Ultimates had already gained the upper hand. Patriarch was also chasing his opponent from the east to the west. He could only continue attacking the half-step sages of the world-defying Holy Sect. Crack! Lock on! But Little Dragon was entangled with his opponent, he simply didn't have a chance to open fire. Sky-filling feathers. At this moment, Xiao Maxian once again used her killing move. Little Dragon heard the sound and without a word, he turned his head and roared, "Are you hitting him or hitting me?" "Of course I'm hitting him. Can't you find an opportunity to hit him? Why do you always bring me along? I'm happy, what do you care? I think you're itching for a beating." June Patriarch's two contract beasts stopped fighting the half-step sage and began to quarrel in the air. Good chance. Xiao Ziji seized the opportunity. Taking advantage of the fact that the half-step sage had just received the sky-filling feathers, he hurriedly pulled the trigger and fired a second shot. Boom! Gorgeous smoke appeared in the air once more. The half-step sage of the world-defying Holy Sect was once again bombarded. He became even more distressed, and even his hair was blown up. Alarmed by the sound of the cannon, Little Dragon and Xiao Maxian stopped quarreling and locked onto him. They either used sky-filling feathers or condensed violent flames to attack him. The half-step sage who had been repeatedly attacked had his strength greatly reduced. He was immediately suppressed by the two contract beasts. The more he fought, the more flustered he became. This was because the disciples of the sect of all times had once again locked onto him with their strange treasure. If he dodged, he would be bombarded. If he didn't dodge, he would have to face the endless entanglement of the man and woman. Boom! After a while, Xiao Ziji seized the opportunity and fired another shot. Then, with incomparable precision, it exploded on the half-step sage's body, causing his hair to emit white smoke. He was strong and could withstand the bombardment of a rocket, but once or twice was fine. How could he continue to do so? So, unfortunately, he dragged his distressed body down. Shwa! Little Long Long rushed over with a trail of flames trailing behind him, and he abruptly extended both of his hands. A series of cannonballs flew toward the falling target like cruise missiles. Xiao Maxian naturally wasn't willing to fall behind. She once again condensed sky-filling feathers and shot them towards the half-step sage. Boom! 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 The area outside the valley suddenly caved in under the crazy bombardment. Finally, a several hundred feet deep pit appeared. As for the half-step sage of the world-defying sacred sect, he lay miserably in the deepest part of the valley, completely unconscious. After being bombarded by the rocket 3 times and being bombarded by the 2 contract beasts for so long, he had to get up and take off his hat to pay his respects. Boom! Boom! On the other side, evil Saint 5 Ultimates displayed his evil techniques to the extreme. While the opponent was fighting with the Extreme Coldness Palace's Supreme Elder, he sneaked in from behind. After dozens of attacks, the half-step sage's mind collapsed. In the end, he could only drag his back covered in black palm prints and flee out of the valley. When he saw the half-step sage of the world-defying sacred sect being knocked unconscious in the deep pit, he knew that the situation was over. So, he transmitted a sound transmission, retreat. His companion didn't have the time to reply because they had already flown several hundred kilometers away. Jun Changshao was madly chasing after them with his saber in hand. It was as if they were entangled in a battle of, "You are the wind and I am the sand." Damn it! After waiting for his companion's sound transmission for a long time, the half-step Wuxia gritted his teeth and flew away without looking back. When the Supreme Elder of the Extreme Coldness Palace and Evil Saint 5 Ultimates saw the other party slip away, they didn't chase after him. Instead, they landed on the boulder. The corners of the mouth of the martial artist standing in the distance twitched. Of the 3 half-step Wuxia, one was knocked unconscious, one was chased all over the world, and the last one directly slipped away. It was simply unbelievable. No wonder Jun Patriarch dared to occupy the valley and was not afraid of so many sections. It turned out that he was not courting death, but he really had the strength to fight with them. Shwa! At this moment, Jun Changshao flew over with his wings and then gasped, "Damn it, he ran so fast." The corners of Li Qingyang and the others' mouths twitched slightly. The 2 contract beasts and senior 5 ultimates could suppress the half-step sage because of their numbers. The Patriarch was really super valiant to fight a half-step sage alone with a blade. "Patriarch," Li Qingyang said, "what about the half-step sage who fainted?" Jun Changshao withdrew his blade and took off his armor, seal his meridians and tie him up. "Yes." Li Fei and Tian Qi quickly ran over. Plop. Jun Changshao sat down and wiped the sweat from his forehead. "Damn it, I'm so tired." Although this guy felt good killing the half-step sage and running all over the world, it also consumed a lot of spiritual energy and strength. If the other party didn't slip away and persisted for a while, he would be completely exhausted. The system said, there is still a big gap between the host and the half-step Wuxia. Without the support of his equipment, with Jun Changshao's 7th grade sword Wuhuang level cultivation, he could only compete with the peak Wuhuang. He would be completely defeated in the face of a half-step sage. Of course. It was still worth it to be able to kill a half-step sage with a cheat. This was because not everyone had the right to use cheats, and not everyone could do well in the other world without being banned after using cheats. Everything returned to normal. Peppa the wild boar in the mine was not disturbed and continued to dig the spirit stone vein. Hao Guang Holy Sect and world-defying Holy Sect, who had suffered a loss, did not send anyone else. In just one night, the natural spirit stones were all dug up. Jun Patriarch counted them, there were at least 2 to 3 million, and said happily, "Let's go back." "Yes sir." Xiao Ziji kept the field cannon and rocket launcher, Zhen Dexiu removed the array and kept the array flag, and the disciples of the sect of all times rode on the hurricane wolf and sped back to the sect. Soon, the valley became cold and cheerless. When the warriors in the distance saw the sect of all times' troops retreat, they entered the mine with a fluke mentality. When they saw that there was nothing inside, the corner of their mouths twitched. The newly unearthed spirit stone vein was dug clean in less than a day. How did they do it? On the way back, the Purple King looked at Jun Changshao and the others who were walking in front of him, and said with a solemn expression, "This fifth-rate sect of all times is not simple." The 3 half-step Wuxia had suffered losses in their hands. He had been sealed for so long, his cultivation and strength had been greatly reduced, and he had been captured as a captive. It was not embarrassing at all. Thinking of this, the Purple King straightened his back and swaggered away. Yi Xingqian, who had followed along, did not say a word, but he was a little unhappy. Because from guarding the spirit stone vein to fighting with the half-step sage, he was just here to be a bystander. No hurry, no hurry. When this emperor regains his peak strength, he will be part of any big scene. Chapter 757. An ore vein containing millions of natural spirit stones was dug clean by Peppa Wild Boar in a short period of time. Its efficiency could be said to be quite fast. On the way back, June Patriarch couldn't help but think to himself, if I can buy the skill to explore underground ores in the shop, then use the Spirit Beast Hall to train this little guy, that would be perfect. Peppa Wild Boar's Earth attribute was simply a natural treasure hunter and a miner. The system said, yes. I know. June Changshao said, of course I have to buy it, right? The system said, or I'll give it to you for free. June Changshao shrugged and said, I don't mind if you give it to me for free. Dream on. The system said. June Changshao ignored it and opened the purchased item list, locking onto the treasure incubator that was rewarded by the mission. The introduction said that this was an item used to incubate treasures of heaven and earth. Its advantage was that it could accelerate the ripening process, but its disadvantage was that it could only incubate treasures of heaven and earth. The herbs planted in the herb garden, regardless of whether they were ordinary or high-grade, could not be described as treasures of heaven and earth, so it had no effect on them. June Changshao couldn't help but feel a little disappointed. If the seeds of the herbs could be incubated, he could buy a few more for the medicine hall to accelerate the ripening process of Martial Emperor pills and other pills, 10,000 contribution points. June Changshao continued to read, and his eyes widened when he saw the final price. If it was an item that could increase one's combat strength, he could accept the higher price. However, if it was an item that could only incubate treasures of heaven and earth, and yet it was priced at a price that could only be found in high-grade shops, then it was a little fucked up. The system said, treasures of heaven and earth are hard to come by, and their growth cycle is extremely long. With this item, you can accelerate the ripening process. If it were me, let alone 10,000, I would buy it even if it was 100,000. June Changshao rolled his eyes. He already knew that the value of this guy's existence was not only to piss him off, but also to instigate him to spend contribution points. He wondered if it had received any commission from the salted fish author. Besides, the host still has the tranquil heart lotus. This item completely meets the standard of treasures of heaven and earth. It can be planted inside to accelerate the ripening process, allowing the missing 2 petals to grow out quickly. The system said. That's right. June Changshao's eyes lit up. This was a heavenly treasure that he had found in the 100-faced medical sage's tomb. If the system hadn't reminded him, he would have almost forgotten about it. Moreover, the evil sage of 5 ultimates had said that only by eating all 9 petals of the tranquil heart Saint Lotus would he be able to completely recover his cultivation. This time, for the sake of the Spirit Stone mine, he had gone head-on against a first-rate and second-rate faction, and it could be said that he had formed a grudge with them. In the future, they might come looking for trouble. If this servant could recover Wu Xing's cultivation, he would undoubtedly be more confident. Buy. Ding. The host has spent 10,000 contribution points and obtained a heavenly treasure incubator X1. It has been transferred into the space ring. Ding. Sect contribution points, 200, 015, 0000. The heavenly treasure incubator was similar to an incubator, but it was smaller in size. It was obviously impossible to plant a large number of heavenly treasures. There was a notch at the bottom. According to the manual, it was used for charging. This item had the same function as an incubator. Heavenly treasures could be planted inside, and all kinds of energy could be used to accelerate the incubation process. Medicinal herbs, ores, crystal cores, and even spirit stones could all be used. Of course. In terms of effect, the best energy was undoubtedly the crystal cores and spirit stones, and the worst was the medicinal herbs and ores. Moreover, the quality of the energy also determined the incubation speed. After June Changshao flipped through the manual, he was speechless. Another product that requires a lot of money. Of course. You want to let a heavenly treasure grow 10 times. You want to let a heavenly treasure grow 100 times. You want to let a heavenly treasure grow 1,000 times. Come on, young man, let's recharge happily. Can it be done without spending money? Yes, This product is based on people. As long as you buy it, you can permanently enjoy 1.5 times the growth speed. 1.5 times is not bad, at least it is accelerated. But for a heavenly treasure that can grow for hundreds or thousands of years, it is simply useless. Sigh. Jun Changshao shook his head and said, I'd better buy money. After returning to the faction, he first settled down a few million spirit stones, then went to the herb garden to transplant the tranquil Saint Lotus into the incubator. Whoosh! In a moment, a faint aura filled the air and then wrapped the tranquil Saint Lotus. Ding! Suddenly, a projection appeared at the bottom of the incubator. The number displayed on it was Heavenly Treasure is in the process of ripening. The original time is 1,000 years. With 1.5 times acceleration, it will be 666. 666 years. Jun Changxiao's mouth twitched. It even listed the original time and acceleration time. Isn't this forcing me to recharge and accelerate? What's the difference between this and a level 999 mobile game where you can get godly equipment from a single kill? It's only 666 years. The system sang in a female voice. Come on, let's have fun. Anyway, there's plenty of time. Get lost. Jun Changshao said. Not to mention 666 years, he couldn't even wait 6 years. So, in order to let the herb mature faster, he had to greatly increase the speed. If 100 times wasn't enough, he had to at least increase it by 1,000 times. Huff. Jun Changshao took a deep breath, but he was having a mental breakdown. Isn't it just 2 petals? It took 1,000 years to grow. If I knew it wouldn't have any effect on Shi Jingxian and Elder Wei, I wouldn't have plucked it. So, the Heavenly Treasure Incubator is your medicine for regret, to make up for your past mistakes, the system said. Sigh. Jun Changshao shook his head, then took out a crystal core and inserted it into the notch. Ding! A soft sound came from the monitor. He only saw that the time, which was accurate to the second, was shortened by 60 seconds as the crystal core's energy entered. Fuck! Jun Changshao almost jumped up. He held his head and said frantically, 1 crystal core is 1 minute faster. The system said, the crystal core's level is too low. If you use this kind of crystal core, 525,600 minutes a year, in 666 years, you'll need. Well, not much, only 300 million or so. Jun Changshao rolled his eyes and said, let's not talk about whether there are dire beasts in the Starfall continent that carry 300 million crystal cores. Even if we kill them, how long will it take to gather that amount? So, if the host doesn't want to waste time, just throw in a crystal core of a higher level, the system said. That's the only way. Jun Changshao took out another crystal core that was comparable to a martial master, and the time was shortened by 2 minutes. Not bad. The system said, this will only require about 170 million crystal cores of the same level. Fuck. Jun Changshao integrated a high-grade crystal core that was comparable to a wuzong, and the time was increased to 4 minutes. Reduce it by half again. Jun Changshao pulled his hair. In the end, he made up his mind and threw in a crystal core that was comparable to a martial king, and the time was increased from 4 minutes to 60 minutes. The system said, if the host uses a crystal core of this level, you'll only need about 5 million. Jun Changshao collapsed on the chair. The Starfall continent might have hundreds of millions of martial disciple level crystal cores, but it was impossible to have more than 5 million martial king level crystal cores. I can't afford it. A martial king level crystal core only increased the speed by 1 hour, which made Jun Changshao feel despair. The system said, the host can try with spirit stones. Jun Changshao was silent. The highest level crystal core he had was martial king level, so if he wanted to test the speed, he could only start with spirit stones. As for medicinal herbs and ores, he didn't even think about it. After all, he couldn't even carry a crystal core. If he used these, he estimated that he would need at least tens of billions of stalks or tons. Let's give it a try. Jun Changshao took out a man-made spirit stone. After merging with it, the time was also reduced to 60 minutes, which was equivalent to the speed increase of a Marshall King-level crystal core. In this way, he could calculate the cost. One man-made spirit stone was 10,000 taels. If he threw in 8 million spirit stones, he could directly mature the Tranquil Heart Saint Lotus. The money needed was Jun Changshao squatted on the ground, covering his face. It was unknown whether he was crying or laughing. 58 billion, ha ha ha, ha 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 ha, don't cry. The system said, try using natural spirit stones. Yes. Jun Changshao stood up and said, I still have natural spirit stones. As he spoke, he took out the warm natural spirit stones that Peppa Wild Boar had just dug out and merged them into the groove. Ding! The notification sounded again. The time on the monitor was reduced by 10 hours. 10 hours. Jun Changshao raised his head, his eyes rolling, and said, hurry up and calculate for me, how much do I need? The system said, more than 580,000 natural spirit stones. This number wasn't small, but Jun Changshao had just dug out a few million spirit stones, so he could afford to use them to mature the lotus. So he spread his hands and waved them, singing in a female voice, come on, let's have some fun, there's plenty of time anyway. Chapter 758. Although using a few 100,000 natural spirit stones to mature the Tranquil Lotus was a high price, Jun Changshao did not feel the pinch. After all, it could allow the evil saint of 5 treasures to recover to Wuxia's level. In an era where it was extremely difficult to become an emperor and rarely appeared, Wuxia was definitely the strongest. If the sect of all times had such a strong person, it would not be inferior to a first-rate or second-rate sect. Not to mention a few 100,000, even if he used all the natural spirit stones he had, Jun Patriarch would not even blink. The system said, a man should have courage. Charge it as much as you can. Of course. Jun Changshao waved his hand and took out a large number of natural spirit stones and began to inject energy into it. A few days later, the countdown on the monitor shortened from 666 to a few seconds. He sat down and clutched his chest, comforting himself with heartache. It's worth it, worth it. Ding! Maturation successful. Whoosh whoosh. The diffuse attributes lingering in the incubator slowly dissipated. The Tranquil Lotus once again had 7 petals and was completely matured. Charge to make me stronger. Jun Changshao said proudly. Patriarch. At this moment, Sun Bukong walked into the study and said, I found a prescription that can cure Elder Wei from the medical saint of all faces medical books. Is that so? Jun Changshao was overjoyed. If the maturation of the Tranquil Lotus was successful, the evil saint of 5 treasures would be able to recover completely. If he could cure Elder Wei's illness, it would be equivalent to having another Wu Huang. However, when Jun Changshao looked at the prescription, the corner of his mouth twitched. This was because it explained in detail that the main ingredient needed to cure the illness of losing one's realm and still having one's aura was the 6-petal Tranquil Lotus. Ha ha ha, ha 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 ha. The system sang, come on, Jun Changshao looked at the prescription carefully and said with a very serious expression, are you sure it can cure Elder Wei's strange illness? Sun Bukong said, this disciple has inquired about Elder Wei's condition in detail. It is exactly the same as what is recorded here. As long as there are medicinal herbs, there is an 80% chance that he can be cured. During this period of time, he had been studying the medical books of the medical saint of all faces. His understanding of the way of medicine could be said to have improved by leaps and bounds. He was definitely the best doctor in the sect of all times. When he entered the sect, he took out the waste tokens of the various emperor's successors. Now, he could really openly claim that he was the successor of the medical sage. However, when Sun Wukong finished speaking, he saw the patriarch slumped on the table, so he asked in confusion, "Patriarch, what's wrong with you? What else could it be?" Heartache. He had just used hundreds of thousands of natural spirit stones to ripen them for evil Saint Wu Ju's treatment, and it turned out that Elder Wei's illness also required this kind of heavenly treasure. The system comforted him, "Don't worry, there are only 6 petals. At least I left one for the host." Scram! Jun Changshao stood up, slapped the pill recipe with his hand, and said, "Not to mention 80%, even if it's only 10%, I still have to try." Ever since Elder Wei joined the sect of all times, he had been in charge of planting medicinal herbs. The rapid improvement of the disciples was completely dependent on him, so he definitely would not hesitate to treat it. As for evil Saint Wu Ju, that would have to wait. With the support of the Patriarch and the 6-petal tranquil heart lotus, Sun Wukong began to boldly study the recipe, but he did not forget to hear the voice in his ears, "Wukong, this medicinal herb is very precious. You must succeed. Patriarch. This disciple will not disappoint you." In the study. Looking at the remaining petal of the tranquil heart lotus in the incubator, Jun Changxiao's nose suddenly turned sour. He looked at the display that showed that it required 2,000 spirit stones under 1.5 times acceleration, and his eyes gradually became moist. At first, he was still thinking that he would be happy even if he had to use up all his spirit stones to help evil Saint Wu Ju recover Wu Ju. However, when it came to this step, it was still very thin. The system's female voice sang, "Give it a try, isn't it just natural spirit stones?" Jun Changshao stood up and said resolutely, "Why would I be reluctant?" Ding! 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 Pieces of warm natural spirit stones were thrown into the incubator. It took a total of 5 days and more than 1.8 million spirit stones to restore the tranquil heart lotus to its former glory. Patriarch. At this moment, Sun Wukong pushed open the door and rushed in. The expression on his face was very complicated, so complicated that he did not know how to describe it. Seeing this, Jun Changshao hurriedly lay down on the chair and clutched his chest. His breathing was rapid as he said, "You. Don't tell me you failed." "Yes." Swoosh. Jun Changxiao's legs gave way and he fainted. Seeing this, Sun Wukong exclaimed, "Oh no, Patriarch has fainted. Someone come and carry him to the medical hall." "Wait, am I not a doctor? Pinch his philtrum. Pinch his philtrum." Phew. Jun Changshao regained consciousness. However, when he thought of Sun Wukong's failure and the hundreds of thousands of spirit stones that he had spent, he was ready to faint again. "Patriarch. I was too excited just now and said something wrong. The medicine to treat Elder Wei has been successfully developed." Bam! The window of the study exploded. The disciples who were cultivating in the inner courtyard looked over and saw Sun Wukong fly out like a ball. He then rolled a few times on the training ground before finally crashing into the wall with a loud boom. The word "Tai" was written upside down on the wall. At the medical hall, Jun Changshao sat at the head of the table. His fingers were tapping on the table and his legs were swaying. He was not being smug. He was panicking because Elder Wei had just consumed the medicine that Sun Wukong had just developed. Please succeed." Phew. After a while, Elder Wei who was sitting at the head of the table opened his eyes. There was a complicated look in his cloudy eyes. Elder Wei, phew. As soon as Jun Changshao opened his mouth, Elder Wei stood up. His cloudy eyes became extremely sharp, and a thick emperor-level aura surged from his body. At that moment, he no longer looked old or dispirited. He gave off a feeling that he was still young and sharp. Swoosh! Elder Wei clenched his fists and could not suppress his excitement. He looked up and said, "Old friend, my cultivation is back. Do you see it? Do you see it? He emphasized the last two sentences, revealing sadness and pain. Tears welled up in his sharp eyes and slid down his cheeks. Ha ha ha. Ha 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 ha. Laughter echoed in the sect of all times. The disciples who heard it could not understand whether it was laughter or crying. In the medical hall, Jun Changshao looked at Elder Wei's sad and joyful expression. He rubbed his chin and thought to himself, what unknown story does he have? Elder Wei's strange illness was completely cured with the help of medicine. As a result, the sect of all times had another emperor-level powerhouse. However, after Elder Wei recovered, apart from planting, he would sit in the medicinal gardens pavilion every day and feel melancholy. Wei, leave this place quickly and live well. Don't think about taking revenge for us. That person's voice sounded in his ear, causing him to grip his teacup tightly. His gaze was conflicted. What are you thinking about? Jun Changshao sat down and poured himself a cup of tea. Elder Wei collected his complicated emotions and said, Patriarch, it's a good thing that my cultivation has recovered, but it's also a bad thing. Jun Changshao took a sip of tea and said, What do you mean? Elder Wei said, When I didn't have my cultivation, I could only linger on like a stray dog. Now that I've recovered my cultivation, I have the urge to take revenge for them. Them? Revenge? Jun Changshao looked at him. Elder Wei poured a cup of tea and drank it in one gulp. Then, holding the teacup, he looked at the sky and said, Patriarch, have you ever heard of the heaven-defying sect that appeared a few hundred years ago? Pfft. Jun Changshao spat out the tea in his mouth, and said, Heaven-defying sect. That's a pretty awesome name, Elder Wei said. This sect, like the sect of all times, rose from nothing and gathered a group of young people with dreams. But later on, the heavens did not defy, but were defied by someone else. Jun Changshao said. Crack, Elder Wei crushed the teacup and said, Patriarch, I was once the vice-sect leader of the heaven-defying sect, and I've been living in this world until now. Now that my cultivation has recovered, should I continue to live, or should I go and take revenge on my enemies? Although he was asking for Jun Changshao's opinion, from his tone, it was clear that he had already made a choice. He was going to take revenge for the brothers that he had worked so hard with. The enemy is very strong. Very strong. Is it a lot? A lot. Jun Changshao poured more tea and gently picked it up, his eyes cold as he said, Don't be reckless and continue to live. Once you have absolute strength, you can turn the world upside down and fight until the universe is reversed. Chapter 759. The Heaven-Defying Faction. A faction that had only appeared a few hundred years ago. The reason this name was so Chunibyu was because its creator was a young man with lofty ambitions. His name was Baldi. Pfft. Jun Changshao spat out another mouthful of tea, a marvelous expression on his face. He got stronger, but he also became bald. Elder Wei said, his surname was Xie, and his given name was Baldi. This Baldi was a name he gave himself later on. It means indomitable spirit. So that's how it is, Jun Changshao said. However, Elder Wei paused, then helplessly said, when he reached middle age, he really did become bald. That's why. Jun Changshao put down his teacup, turned his face to the camera, and seriously said, You have to be careful when you choose your name. Sect Master Xie must be very strong, right? Not bad. Only Piku Huang. The words not bad and also were used in a very flirtatious manner, causing Jun Changshao's lips to twitch. But since this person dared to use the word heaven-defying, his strength was bound to be extraordinary. Elder Wei. Jun Changshao comforted, in this world where lifespans are generally long, it's never too late for a gentleman to take revenge. There's no need to rush. The sect master and vice-sect master were both Emperor Realm experts, so the heaven-defying faction's enemies were definitely strong. He did not approve of Elder Wei taking revenge right now, so he decided to lay low and grow first. I can't wait, Elder Wei said. This was where he was at a loss. Before, he had no cultivation and forced himself to be numb, muddling through his days. Now that he had recovered his cultivation and thought about the death of his brothers, he found it hard to suppress the urge to take revenge. Jun Changshao seriously said, "Give the sect some time. Once you're strong enough, this one will take revenge with you." "No." Elder Wei resolutely said, "This is my grudge. How can it involve the sect?" For his brothers, he was willing to fight the enemy right now, even if it meant staining the battlefield with blood, even if his soul flew to the 9 heavens, he would not complain. But he would not allow the sect of all times to participate, because this was his personal grudge and should be resolved in private. Elder Wei. Jun Changshao stood up and looked at the sky with his hands behind his back. He said, "This is your own vengeance. Logically speaking, I shouldn't help you. But since you're the Hall Master of the sect of all times and have done so much for the sect, how can I just sit by and do nothing?" "Patriarch, don't say any more." Jun Changshao had already made up his mind. "I'm not avenging you. I'm repaying the debt you owe for your contributions to the sect of all times over the years." There was no room for doubt in his voice. Elder Wei had no choice but to shut his mouth and clench his fists. He said, "I understand, Patriarch. I will continue to live in seclusion until I have enough strength to take revenge on them." Jun Changshao said, "You can go to the training tower in the secret realm to train." "Yes." Elder Wei nodded. "Senior brother, what happened to Senior Wuxia?" Li Fei asked in a low voice as he looked at evil Saint Wu Ju, who was standing on the mountain peak in the backyard. Li Qingyang said, "I'm not sure either. Ever since the Patriarch came to find him, he had been standing on the peak with his hands behind his back without saying a word. There was no expression on his face. Could he be sick?" Li Fei asked. "Don't worry about it." Li Qingyang said, "Let's go and cultivate." Yes. Everyone began to get busy as usual. Occasionally, when they passed by the training field, they would subconsciously look at the peak of the back mountain. They would definitely see the old man posing. The disciples of the sect of all times could not understand evil Saint Wuxia because they had never experienced the pain of being trapped in the graveyard for thousands of years and having their cultivation suppressed for thousands of years. They had never experienced the pain of losing something and then regaining it. Xiao Ziji had experienced it before. But compared to Wu Sheng, it was still too far away. Evil Saint Wuxia stood on the peak for 3 days and 3 nights before walking down. He then went to Jun Changshao's study and cupped his hands. "Thank you, Master." He thought that there was no hope of recovering Wu Sheng in his life, but he did not expect that Jun Changshao would directly give him the 7-petal tranquil heart lotus. At that time, evil Saint Wuxia did not think about how he got the 2 petals again, but his mind was filled with the thought that he could finally, completely recover his cultivation. If his mind was not stable enough, he might have already burst into tears. After all, it was not easy to get it back after losing it for so long. Jun Changshao clasped his hands together and said, "Are you willing to join the sect of all times?" Evil Saint Wujue's soul origin was controlled and was equivalent to a servant, but he was not a member of the sect. Now that his cultivation had recovered, he had plans to take him in. "As long as Master does not despise me for being an evil cultivator, I am willing to serve the sect of all times," Evil Saint Wujue said seriously. If it was when he first came to the sect of all times, he might have been unwilling to join the sect of all times due to his soul origin being controlled. But now, even if he had to return his soul, he was willing to join. It was not because of that meal. It was during the time he lived in the sect of all times that he felt the taste of home. It was something that he had never felt in his entire life of evil cultivation. Name: Ding Xinguang. What is the meaning of this name? My parents gave it to me in hopes of having a prosperous family. Pa. Jun Changshao stamped the patriarch's seal and said, from now on, you are a member of the sect of all times. If you perform well, your soul origin will be returned. Yes, Master. Call me Patriarch. Yes, Patriarch. Elder Wei's strange illness was cured, and the sect of all times had a new member, Wu Huang. Ding Xingwang's injuries were healed, and the sect of all times had a new member, Wu Sheng. In terms of top-tier strength, he improved by leaps and bounds. Still not enough, still not enough. Jun Changshao called the Extreme Coldness Palace's Grand Elder over and said, "Your palace lord seems to have forgotten about you. Why don't you join my sect?" It was not forgotten. He did not dare to come over and ask for it. Especially when Lu Qianqian had inherited the Ice Emperor's legacy. Even now, the Extreme Coldness Palace's palace lord was still cursing the other sects behind their backs for not informing them earlier and offending the sect with the Ice Emperor's legacy. You have the right to refuse, but, Jun Changshao pointed into the distance and said, it's best to think carefully before answering. The Extreme Coldness Palace's Grand Elder turned around and saw Lu Qianqian leaning against the door of the main hall, her face as cold as ever. Thus, he shuddered and hurriedly said, I agree. During the time he was sweeping the floor, he had also thought it through. This woman who had inherited the Ice Emperor's legacy was equivalent to the Ice Emperor. In the future, if she had the intention of unifying her forces in Northeast Lu Province, his Extreme Coldness Palace, Frost Sect, Xianling Sect, and other sects would not be able to escape. She was now a disciple of the sect of all times and was in the growth stage. If she joined the sect early on, she might be put in an important position in the future. Name: Gongsun Haohai. After sweeping the floor of the sect of all times for so long, the Extreme Coldness Palace's Grand Elder was finally moved by the author's decision to give him a name. This was a joyous occasion. After accepting Gongsun Haohai, the sect of all times had another half-step Wu Sheng, and its strength had increased again. It was hard to imagine that a fifth-rate sect would have one Wu Sheng, one half-saint, two Wu Huangs, and Jun Changshao, a seventh-grade sword and martial emperor. In terms of peak strength, the sect of all times was definitely not afraid of any second-rate or third-rate sections. Their core strength was also not inferior, because the number of martial king disciples had already exceeded 3 digits. The only weakness was the strength of the grassroots. Especially in terms of numbers, they could not be compared to the other sections. Creak. The door of the cell opened, and Jun Changshao walked in. Jun Changshao. The world-defying sacred sect's half-saint, who was tied up, said angrily, "How long are you going to lock me up?" "I'm going to lock you up to deliver the spirit stones," Jun Changshao said. He had already ordered someone to send a letter to the world-defying sacred sect to let this half-saint return with 1,000,000 spirit stones. However, half a month had passed, and there was still no news. Humph. That half-saint said angrily, "A small fifth-rate sect like you can't bear the anger of a second-rate sect. If you know what's good for you, quickly let me go." Bang! Jun Changshao suddenly rushed over, pressed him to the ground with one hand, and said coldly, "Old man, don't put on airs when you've been reduced to a prisoner." Jun Changshao. At this moment, an angry shout came from the outside world, "Get out here." Jun Changshao's spiritual sense spread out. In the sky outside the Iron Bone Mountain, there were 4 martial artists. 2 of them were the half-step Wu Sheng from the Bright Light Sacred Sect who had been beaten away at the entrance of the valley. Again. Jun Changshao laughed coldly. Buzz. In the sky above the sect of all times, the sect protection array was instantly activated. It was not Jun Changshao who activated it, but Li Luoqiu. From the shout, she realized that the other party was definitely here to cause trouble. Whoosh! Ding Xingwang was the first to fly out of the sect and hover above the sect protection array. He looked at the 4 martial artists, especially the half-saint who had fought with him before, and laughed coldly, "Junior, you still dare to come?" That half-saint said angrily, "Despicable and shameless fellow, if you have the ability, fight me one-on-one, not use underhanded methods behind my back. Previously, in the sky above the valley, he could have defeated Gongsun Haohai, but this evil cultivator had been sneak attacking him from behind, making it difficult for him to divert his attention to deal with the enemy. In the end, he could only escape in a sorry state. One-on-one. Ding Xingwang tilted his head and laughed evilly, "Are you sure?" Chapter 760. Recently, the Jianhu had been discussing that the sect of all times had occupied the newly unearthed spirit stone vein and repelled the experts of the first and second-rate sections. As the news spread, it also caused a lot of shock. Winning the championship in the Dragon-Tiger battle for hegemony, this new generation of sects had the strength, but to be able to compete with the older sects was a bit unexpected. After Mu Changhong, Yi Tianqing and the others heard the news, they gave Jun Changshao the evaluation that this guy was getting bolder and bolder. That's not true. Among the many sects, forcefully occupying the mineral veins was simply too awesome. Of course, they were also very worried that the Haoguang sacred sect and world-defying saint, who had suffered a great loss, were willing to admit defeat and did not take the next step. Of course there was. However, they had always been considering whether to send out Wu Sheng to deal with this sect with all kinds of treasures and equipment. After a period of struggle, the Haoguang sacred sect still decided to take action, not only for the spirit stone vein, but also for the face of their own sect. Therefore, the old man with white hair and a youthful face who was suspended in mid-air was a genuine expert of Wu Sheng. In terms of cultivation, he was not inferior to the great senior imperial city lord Han. He still had his demeanor, with his hands behind his back, his eyes filled with indifference. This was definitely not the arrogance and despotism of a playboy, but the pride and aura that an expert who was only second to the emperor level should have. As for the other person, he was an expert of the world-defying sacred sect, whose strength was still half a step away from Wu Sheng. He met the Haoguang sacred sect halfway and came to the sect of all times with the purpose of rescuing the captured semi-sage. The current situation was: outside the Iron Bone Mountain, there were 3 semi-sage and 1 Wu Sheng. The lineup could be said to be super luxurious. In the past, this level of expert might not even be seen in the second or third-rate sects, let alone in the remote southwest Yangzhou. However, Ding Xingwang was alone above the sect protecting Great Array, facing the 4 experts. Not only was he not afraid, he tilted his head and looked at the semi-sage who had been tricked by him before, and a sinister smile appeared on his face. Jun Changshao sat outside the main hall and leisurely drank a mouthful of tea. He would not appear in this kind of matter and give full authority to Ding Xingwang who had just joined the sect. Sure enough. It was a wise decision to spend millions of spirit stones earlier. Who fainted from heartache? The system added. Seeing Ding Xingwang's extremely annoying appearance, the half-step sage of the Radiant Sacred Sect said angrily, "Do you think you can trick me without anyone's help?" When he thought of what had happened some time ago, he was filled with anger. This evil cultivator's strength was only at the Emperor realm. If he hadn't been distracted by fighting Gongsun Haohai, he wouldn't have been defeated time and time again. Come, come. Ding Xingwang flew out of the sect and hovered in a relatively spacious area below. He said, "Today, I won't look for any helpers. I'll have a good fight with you." Really? The half-step saint sneered. In his heart, he was muttering, will this guy play some dirty tricks again? If it was an opponent from a righteous sect, he wouldn't be afraid at all. However, if it was an evil cultivator, he would have to seriously consider his options. Elder Qin. Wu Xing said indifferently, "Since he wants to fight with you, how can you refuse?" Elder Qin, who was considering whether or not to go, heard this and his mouth twitched. In the end, he could only bite the bullet and fly over. It's fine, it's fine. He's just an Emperor Realm evil cultivator. As long as there's no one to help him, even if he has some dirty tricks, why should I, a half-step Wu Sheng, be afraid? Thinking of this, Elder Qin stopped more than 10 feet away and said with a cold gaze, "Old man, whoosh." Just as he started to speak, a cold wind suddenly blew in front of him. Ding Xingwang had already appeared out of thin air. His skinny palm gathered evil energy and blasted straight at him. Bang! There was an explosion, and the evil energy was rampant. Boom! The empty area outside the Iron Bone Mountain suddenly caved in, and a huge 5-finger print appeared. Elder Qin of the Bright Light Holy Sect lay in the center of the palm print. His whole body had caved in by several feet. The clothes on his chest were corroded, and a dark palm print appeared on his skin. He had already fainted with a ferocious look, but the black palm print was still releasing evil energy. It was like lines wandering around his body, slowly eroding his meridians. "Kid." Ding Xingwang floated in the air and said, "When this old man was wandering in the martial arts world, you were still wearing open-crotch pants and using urine and mud." He had knocked a half-step martial sage unconscious with a single palm strike. This old generation cultivator was indeed very domineering. Awesome. Li Fei's eyes widened. The eyes of the disciples of the sect of all times were also filled with admiration. Obviously, they did not expect the strength of the senior 5 absolutes to be so terrifying. "Tsk," Yi Xingchen snorted coldly. Although the evil sect Wu Sheng was very strong, he was just trash in front of him back then. Ding Xingwang knocked Elder Qin out with a single palm, causing the 2 half-step saints of the Bright Light Holy Sect and the world-defying Holy Sect to be dumbfounded. This gloomy old man's strength seemed to be only Wu Huang's. How could he have such terrifying combat strength? Could it be that he had hidden his cultivation from the beginning? Of course. As a true evil cultivator, he never relied on his aura to intimidate others. If he could hide, he would hide and then seize the opportunity to give a fatal blow. Wu Sheng, who had always been indifferent, had a rare dignified expression on his face. Then, he said in a deep voice, "This is the 5 absolutes palm. What is your relationship with the evil saint 5 absolutes?" "Evil saint 5 absolutes?" The 2 half-step saints' faces suddenly changed. This was the evil sect Wu Sheng from more than 3,000 years ago. He was ruthless and bloodthirsty. The number of righteous experts who died in his hands was at least 8,000, if not 10,000. Later, the medical saint of all faces took action and subdued him. Since then, he had disappeared without a trace. And the famous martial skill of the evil saint 5 absolutes was the 5 absolutes palm. It was powerful and extremely vicious. Being hit by it would cause one to suffer from 5 kinds of evil energy and eventually die in pain. "Jie jie jie." Ding Xingwang laughed strangely and said, "This old man has retired from the martial arts world for more than 3,000 years. Unexpectedly, there are still people who remember." "Not bad, not bad." Wu Sheng said in shock, "You are the evil saint 5 absolutes." If he was serious just now, he was obviously a little nervous now. After all, more than 3,000 years ago, he had just entered Wu Huang's level. In terms of seniority, he was far inferior to the evil saint 5 absolutes. "Kid." Ding Xingwang smiled evilly and said, "This old man's 5 absolutes palm is a secret. What do you think?" The corner of Wu Sheng's mouth twitched slightly. The other 2 half-step saints gradually broke out in cold sweat. Obviously, they had already confirmed that this gloomy guy was the evil saint 5 absolutes from more than 3,000 years ago. Wasn't that guy dealt with by the medical saint of all faces? How could he still be alive? How could he be in the sect of all times? Elder Ding. Jun Changshao, who was sitting outside the main hall, said, "Since they have come from so far away, you will represent this seat to receive them properly. Don't be rude." "Yes, Patriarch." Ding Xingwang said. Wu Sheng and the 2 half-step saints immediately understood that this elder was an elder of the sect of all times. No wonder he dared to ignore the various sects and forcefully occupy the spirit stone mine. It turned out that there was an evil cultivator Wuxia hidden in the sect. The three of you. Ding Xinguang laughed. Do you want to go up one by one or together? The corner of the three's mouth twitched. Shwa. At this moment, the space shook. Ding Xinguang appeared in front of the half-step saint that Jun Changshao had chased away, and said, if you don't go up, this old man will. Boom. That half-step saint and Elder Qin were both blasted down and fainted in the deep pit. A pitch-black palm print appeared on their chest. The half-step saint from the world-defying sacred sect was so scared that he panicked. He was about to escape, but before he could turn around, he felt a cold wind whistling towards him, and then, with a boom, he fell to the ground. In the blink of an eye, 3 half-step Wuxia had all fainted under Ding Xinguang's 3 palms. This strength was truly terrifying. Chapter 761. At the periphery of Iron Bone Mountain, 3 unconscious half-saints were lying in 3 deep pits. Although they weren't from the same family, they were lying neatly, and even their postures were the same. That's awesome. The disciples of the sect of all times widened their eyes. Although they hadn't fought with a half-saint before, they knew from his aura that he was definitely an existence they should look up to. But now, he had killed him so easily. Junior brother Yi. Li Fei said enviously, when can we be as awesome as Senior Wuxia? Yi Xingqian was expressionless, but he was thinking, you were already shocked by a saint. If you see an emperor-level attack, won't you be scared out of your wits? Our Knight Emperor's mentality is stable. However, the desire to quickly return to his peak was getting stronger. If it was before, Yi Xingqian would think that recovering his martial emperor cultivation was one step closer to revenge. But now, he was thinking, I don't want to be a bystander. I want to show off in front of my fellow disciples. The more eager he was to show off, the more it showed that his mentality had completely changed. He already had a sense of identity with the sect. The happiest person was naturally Jun Changshao when the 3 half-saints were killed in an instant. The knot in his heart caused by the millions of spirit stones that had been lost was completely untied. Worth it. Super worth it. Ding Xinguang looked at Wu Xing in the distance and said with a smile, Kid, let this old man see your strength. Beads of sweat appeared on the forehead of the bright light sacred sex expert. After the shortest thought, he cupped his hands and said, there's still a long way to go. Let's fight another day. Buzz. The space shook and disappeared. Did he run away? The corner of Jun Changxiao's mouth twitched. That's too cowardly. It wasn't that he was cowardly. It was that evil Saint Wujue's performance was too strong. What's more, he was an elder who had broken through to the saint level more than 3,000 years ago. The bright light sacred sex expert was naturally afraid. Facing the serious Wu Sheng, he might fight, but he was afraid that this kind of unscrupulous evil sect Wu Sheng would play dirty tricks. At that time, he would definitely be tricked. How can you leave? Ding Xinguang's brow furrowed in displeasure and he immediately used his space force to chase after him. He wouldn't let that guy run away. After all, he had just recovered his strength, and he wanted to find a powerhouse of the same level to fight to exercise his aging muscles and bones. The 2 Wu Xing left one after another, leaving only the slightly vibrating space. Men. Jun Changshao waved his hand and said, tie all 3 of them up. Yes. Li Fei, 7 fields, and the others began to move. He felt a sense of accomplishment for tying up 3 half-saints at once. In the prison cell, the semi-sage of the world-defying sacred sect lay weakly on the ground, wondering in his heart, why can't I feel the aura? Could it be that elder who came to save me, is talking to the sect of all times? Talk my ass. In this kind of situation, they would definitely torture him and make him understand the consequences of offending a first or second-rate sect. Creak. Suddenly, the prison door opened. He tried his best to turn his head to the side and saw 3 figures flying in and then falling beside him like dead dogs. Elder Qin. Elder. Elder who? Seeing the appearance of the 3 of them, the semi-sage's eyeballs almost popped out. How did they get captured too? Furthermore, their entire bodies were black and purple, as if they had been poisoned. Sigh. Zhao Daodu shook his head, and said, another 3 pitiful people have come. As a permanent prisoner of the sect of all times, he had witnessed too many people being sent in. He had long been able to treat them with a normal heart. Of course. He didn't know that, including the 3 who just came in, all 4 of them were half-saints. Otherwise, he would definitely be so shocked that he would shrink into the corner again. He bit his finger and exclaimed, I'm actually cellmates with so many big shots. Hall Masterly Jun Changshao sat in the drizzle hall, knocked on the table for a while, and said, send a letter to the Bright Light Sacred Sect and the World-Defying Sacred Sect, tell them to use spirit stones to redeem 4 half-saints, 1 for each head. 3 million. Since the 2 first and second-rate sects were so enthusiastic to send people over, he had to not let them down and extort more. Yes. Li Luoqiu immediately took action. On the same day, the members of the Drizzle Hall used various methods to send the kidnapping letter to the 2 sections. Damn it. In the main hall of the Bright Light Sacred Sect, the Vice-Patriarch angrily smashed the table and said, what the hell is He Qingxian doing? He Qingxian was the Wu Sheng who had been scared away by old Ding. Logically speaking, there was no problem in leaving this matter to him. Why were the other 2 half-saints captured by the sect of all times, and even sent a kidnapping letter? Swish! At this moment, He Qingxian flew in from outside, then sat down on a chair, sweating profusely and gasping for breath. Seeing this, the Vice-Patriarch and the others were stunned. What's going on? Don't mention it. He Qingxian said, that evil Saint Wu Ju who has been missing for thousands of years is an elder of the sect of all times. I was chased by him for tens of thousands of miles and almost couldn't return. What? The Vice-Patriarch was shocked, evil Saint Wu Ju? That's not right. Wasn't that old evil killed by the medical saint of all faces? How is he still alive in this world? An elder said in disbelief. The Vice-Patriarch said in a deep voice, are you sure it's evil Saint Wu Ju? This question made He Qingxian collapse. I'm Wu Sheng, after all. If I wasn't chased by a long-established elder, how could I be in such a sorry state? He used the 5 ultimate palms to injure Elder Qin and Elder Sun, so he must be evil Saint Wu Ju. He said firmly. What? Elder Qin and Elder Sun were injured by the 5 ultimate palms? The Vice-Patriarch suddenly became anxious. After all, he knew that this martial art was very vicious, and those who were hit by it would definitely suffer a fate worse than death. He guessed right. The 3 half-saints imprisoned in the prison had already woken up from their coma, but their skin was black and purple. Then, they curled up together, and their bodies were trembling violently. The evil qi was madly disturbing the meridians in their bodies, and it broke through their sea of consciousness and began to nibble at the deeper level of their souls. Ah, 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 weak and painful screams sounded in the prison, and the sound was like the howling of ghosts in the night. Oh my God! Zhao Daodu curled up in the corner, looking at the 3 newcomers with ferocious faces and bodies surrounded by black qi. He was so scared that his teeth were chattering, and his scalp was about to explode. Patriarch. Outside the prison, Ding Xingwang said proudly, after being hit by my 5 ultimate palms, you will be tortured to death by the 5 kinds of evil qi in less than 3 days. The process will be so painful that you will wish you were dead. I can see that. Jun Changshao said. Grandpa Ding. Yao Menjin blinked and said expectantly, can you teach me the 5 ultimate palms? This, Ding Xingwang shook his head and said, although the power of this move is strong, the process is very painful. It's better that you don't practice it. I'm not afraid. Yao Menjing said. Jun Changshao smiled and said, Old Ding, since the little girl wants to learn it, you can teach it to her. Ding Xingwang said, Okay, I will teach it to you tomorrow. Thank you Grandpa Ding, thank you Patriarch. Yao Menjing left happily. Ding Xingwang said seriously, Patriarch, this girl has the innate demon body. If you let her come into contact with the evil Sect's techniques, won't you be afraid that there will be trouble in the future? As long as she doesn't do anything that will harm the common people and kill the innocent, if there is any trouble, I will take care of it for her. Jun Changshao said. This was the philosophy of his sect. Under the premise of not doing anything harmful, disciples had the right to choose the path they wanted to walk, whether it was the martial path, the sword path, the evil path, or the demonic path. The next day, Ding Lao Yen called Yao Menjing over and patiently taught her the 5 ultimate palms. The little girl had the innate demon body, so her speed in cultivating the evil Sect's techniques was very fast. In just half a day, she had comprehended it, and it was amazing. In the afternoon, old Ding felt a strong spiritual power coming from the outside world. He shook his head and said, again. Swoosh! Swoosh! Not long after, the Vice Patriarch of the Bright Light Holy Sect brought He Qingxian to the outside of Mount Ironbone and said, Jun Patriarch, can we talk calmly? Jun Changshao said in a clear voice, if your honorable sect is here to negotiate with reason, then this seat welcomes you with open arms. Chapter 762. Ironbone Town, the Mansion. Li Qingyang and the others stood outside on high alert. In the hall, Jun Changshao sat in the main seat in front of the round table. His hands were clasped together, and there was a harmless smile on his face. Behind him, Ding Xingwang had his arms crossed, and there was a faint evil aura around him, as if telling the world that he could make a move at any time. The Vice Patriarch of the Bright Light Holy Sect and He Qingxian sat opposite each other. Their expressions were very serious, but there was more anger in their hearts. They never thought that one day they would sit down and talk with the leader of a fifth-rate sect. This was simply too embarrassing. Both of you. Jun Changshao said seriously, if sitting down can solve the problem, I have never liked to use violence. Who would believe that? Then let's have a good talk, the Vice Patriarch said. Jun Changshao said, since we are talking, we should be reasonable first. What do you think? The corners of their mouths twitched slightly. If we were not reasonable, why would we sit down? Jun Changshao knocked on the table and said, as the old saying goes, treasures of heaven and earth are ownerless, and those who are fated can obtain them. Do you agree? I agree, the Vice Patriarch said. Jun Changshao said, the spirit stone vein that appeared in the valley is ownerless. What's wrong with the sect of all times occupying it? That's right, the Vice Clan leader said. Of course. Lord Changshao leaned back and said, I've occupied the mine. You can attack me, because that's your right. The Vice Patriarch and He Qingxian looked at each other. But Jun Changshao suddenly slammed the table and said, you can't take the vein, which only shows that you are not capable. How dare you come to the sect of all times to make trouble? His tone was very heavy, and he spoke quickly. Spittle flew everywhere. Fortunately, he was far away from the Vice Patriarch and He Qingxian. Otherwise, his face would have been splashed. Patriarch. Old Ding whispered, calm down. Calm my ass. Jun Changshao stood up and pointed at the Patriarch, saying, today, I'd like to ask you something. If your Radiant Light Sacred Sect occupies the mine and the other first-rate sects fail to take it, will they come looking for trouble? No. Jun Changxiao's spittle flew everywhere as he said, that's because they still want face. Unlike your Radiant Light Sacred Sect, who can't compete with others, they send stronger martial artists. Although he sounded a little agitated, it was absolutely reasonable. Many spirit stone veins had been discovered, and many sects had fought over the mining rights. Even if they fought until their faces were bloodied, as long as one side lost, they would give up. They would not look for trouble with the other sections. This was a tacit understanding and an unwritten rule. Otherwise, it would be very boring to fight each other over the mineral veins and go around in circles. June Patriarch. He Qingxian said in a deep voice, "You're the one who hurt my sect's elder first." This sentence was to tell June Changshao that the Radiant Light Sacred Sect came looking for trouble not because of the mineral veins, but because of a personal grudge. Please. June Changshao said, all of this is based on snatching the mineral veins. Don't tell me we don't fight and sit together to play scissors, stone, paper, and whoever loses will slap themselves. To put it bluntly. He said again, you just think that the sect of all times is easy to bully, that we're a soft persimmon that can be pinched at will, so don't use excuses to cover it up. His words hit the nail on the head. If other first-rate sects occupied the mineral veins, the Radiant Light Sacred Sect would not have been able to snatch it. Even if they were unhappy, they would not have come to ask for it because it was not in accordance with the rules of the martial world. I've already explained the reason. If you're not satisfied, you can continue to argue, June Changshao said. His reason was that the sect of all times had the ability to occupy the mineral veins. Since they lost, they should give up and not pester them again and again with the identity of a first-rate sect. In fact, this was the law of the jungle. But today, the sect of all times, weak, might not be food for the strong. He had to change it to the weak eat the meat of the strong. Fight? You can't. Reason? You can't do it either. June Patriarch is right. The Vice Patriarch compromised. Our Radiant Light Sacred Sect was a little reckless. Today, they did not come to the sect of all times to reason. They just wanted to bring back the two trapped half-saints. It's great to know your mistakes and correct them. June Chang smiled and said, I'm not someone who haggles over every ounce. In that case. The Vice Patriarch smiled. I wonder if you can release the two elders trapped in your sect. Yes. June Changshao stretched out 3 fingers and said, 3 million spirit stones per person. Of course, it doesn't have to be natural. Artificial will do. The Vice Patriarch frowned. June Patriarch, our Radiant Light Sacred Sect really can't take out so many spirit stones. They could take it out, but they couldn't bear to. The two of them added up to 6 million spirit stones. It was an astronomical sum of money. For a first-rate sect, this was definitely a huge blow. No discord, no concord. June Changshao said, how about this, I'll give you a discount. 99 million spirit stones for 2 people. Old Ding's mouth twitched. Only 10,000 spirit stones less. This discount was really fucking generous. June Patriarch, He Qingxian said with a sullen face. He Qingxian said with a sullen face, we are here to negotiate sincerely, not to joke around. If evil Saint Wuxia was not standing behind him, he really wanted to stand up and press this guy to the ground and rub his face against the floor. I'm also very sincere. June Changshao said, 98 million spirit stones for the 2 elders of your sect. Not a single one less. Patriarch, at least 10,000 spirit stones, Old Ding reminded. Give them a friendship price. The Vice Patriarch and He Qingshuan's faces turned ugly. June Changshao shrugged and said, you too should know that this elder of mine cultivates a martial art called the 5 ultimate palms. Whoosh! Old Ding raised his hand cooperatively. 5 types of yin qi filled his entire palm, instantly causing the atmosphere in the room to become abnormally cold and eerie. The Vice Patriarch's frown deepened. If he didn't know about this vicious palm technique, he definitely wouldn't have put down his pride and personally come to the sect of all times to negotiate. June Changshao said, 97 million spirit stones in exchange for the lives of 2 half-saints. I think your sect should be able to accept it. Why is another 10,000 spirit stones less? Old Ding muttered. Of course. Jun Changshao said, you don't have to pay. I won't kill them either. I'll give them a palm strike every 3 days to extend their lives until the end of time. The system broke down and said, this isn't a 5-step snake. If you're bitten, you'll walk 4.5 steps and be bitten again. You'll continue walking 4.5 steps in an endless cycle. The vice patriarch and He Qingxian were so angry that their hands were trembling. They knew that Jun Changshao definitely didn't have the guts to kill their sect's elders. However, being detained and tortured all the time wasn't a solution. Oh, right. Jun Changshao said, recently, I've been preparing to set up a newspaper to report some small news in the Jianghu. The matter of your sect's elders being trapped in the sect of all times should be considered a headline. When the time comes and it spreads throughout the continent, I'm afraid it will damage your sect's reputation. The vice patriarch didn't understand what the newspaper meant. However, he could tell that this guy wanted to spread the news. Jun Patriarch. After a mental struggle, the vice patriarch gritted his teeth and said, my bright light holy sect can only take out 4 million spirit stones. You, deal. Jun Changshao said. Gah. The vice patriarch was stunned. Jun Changshao said, hand over the spirit stones now, and I'll release them immediately. The vice patriarch's mouth twitched violently. Did I say too much? Should I stick to the principle and continue to say 2 million spirit stones? Outside the cell, Elder Qin and Elder Sun tried their best to walk out. The sunlight was too dazzling, making them temporarily unable to adapt to it and close their eyes. Jun Changshao walked up cordially and patted the weeds on their shoulders, saying, I've wronged you too. If you have the chance in the future, please be sure to come and visit. The door of my sect of all times will always be open for you. Just like that, the bright light holy sect paid 4 million spirit stones as ransom and happily took away the 2 half-saints. Not long after they left, the world-defying holy sect's representative sat on the negotiation table in the mansion's hall. Chapter 763. Creek. The prison cell opened again. The 2 half-saints from the world-defying sacred sect dragged their weak bodies out. After adapting to the sunlight, their hearts were filled with mixed feelings. They had broken through the 9 Bens array in the southern desolate state and fought against peerless monsters in the northern desert state. The 2 of them could be considered veterans of the Jianghu. Who would have thought that one day they would become prisoners, and even be ransomed for ransom? Sigh. A lifetime of stains. You too. Jun Changshao said, come and play often in the future. The 2 half-saints left the sect of all times under the guidance of their companions. As for coming to play often, only ghosts would come to play. Creak. The prison cell closed again, blocking out all the sunlight. Senior prisoner number 1 Zhao Daodu was alone in a corner, secretly wiping the tears from the corner of his eyes. His cellmates had changed batch after batch, and he was the only one still holding on. This was too much of a bully. If he could turn back time, Zhao Daodu would rather pretend to be a martial emperor or Wu Sheng than pretend to be Jun Changshao. Patriarch, that kid is quite pitiful. Why don't we just let him go? Li Qingyang couldn't bear it. Jun Changshao said, sure. No. I won't go. In the prison cell, Zhao Daodu hugged the bars and cried, I want to stay here. I want to eat fried rice. Although the taste of being imprisoned was not good, Lu Wansher's fried rice had already corroded his stomach and soul. As long as he was given something to eat, he would be willing to stay in prison. There's no saving him. Li Qingyang walked out. At this moment, he saw the spiritual cat following behind Xiao Moxian with its tail raised. Its eyes flashed with an expression of being picked up, raised high, and ruthlessly thrown down. Sigh. Li Qingyang helplessly shook his head. No one who enters the sect of all times is normal, including small animals. What a concise summary. The world-defying sacred sect spent 2 million spirit stones to redeem the prisoners. The main reason was that the other party had brought along a negotiation expert, and June Patriarch could not win against him. In the end, he gave in step by step, reducing the price from 6 million to 2 million. The price of 1 million per head was set long ago. Asking for 6 million was just to give the other party room to bargain. As for the vice patriarch of the Bright Light Holy Sect, it was obvious that he didn't know how to do business. He was tricked by the June Patriarch to directly ask for 4 million. Speaking of haggling, June Changshao had once met a street vendor on Earth who was selling leather shoes for 1,000 yuan. June Patriarch asked if he was willing to sell them for 20 yuan. Yes. Therefore, he spent 20 yuan to buy a pair of leather shoes. After wearing them for less than 2 days, he developed athlete's foot. It was a sad story. AI. Recalling the past, June Changshao sighed. When can we go back? Although he didn't have any relatives on Earth, he could surf the internet, watch movies, and watch beautiful women walking around on the bustling streets. Moreover, with his current cultivation, he could follow the internet cable to find the readers who gave him bad reviews and personally return the blade. If you never forget, there will be an echo. The system said, as long as the host keeps developing and refreshing, maybe you can get a spaceship to travel through the universe and return to the Milky Way. Phew. June Changshao knew that the system was deliberately instigating him to spend contribution points, but he still looked up at the sky and said, I hope that day will come. The millions of natural spirit stones dug out from the mineral vein were all used to restore the cultivation of Elder Wei and Old Ding. However, he also earned 6 million artificial spirit stones, so the loss wasn't too big. Swoosh! June Changshao put the incubator of heaven and earth into the interspatial ring. The tranquil heart lotus was only left with a lonely root. Even if it was accelerated by 1.5 times, it would still take several thousand years to mature. If the spacetime secret realm has no time limit, I can save a lot of time by putting the incubator inside. Simple. The system said, the problem will be solved if a higher-level secret realm is created. June Changshao said suspiciously, you've been instigating me to spend contribution points every day. Did you get a commission? Sigh, I thought I hid it very well, but the host still found out. The system said helplessly. June Changshao's expression turned into stone. Bro, you spared no effort to instigate me. The ghost hid it very well. If that's the case, I can only be honest. The system was silent for a while and said, actually, whenever you spend contribution points in the store, I can take a small part of the commission to improve the system's functions. In other words, the reason why I can exist is because the host keeps spending. What if I don't spend? What will happen if the battery is not changed? No power. If the host doesn't spend, the system won't be able to provide power. I will disappear, or even, disappear completely. I see. June Changshao said. The system said, if the host dies, the system dies. If the host doesn't spend, the system will also die. So I have my own difficulties. Every family has its own difficulties. June Changshao said, I can understand your difficulties. At that moment, the shadow standing under the setting sun seemed to split into two. One was his, and the other was the system. Both of them were in the same boat. If the host still needs me and wants to continue cheating, hurry up and buy something. The battery is running low. Okay. June Changshao opened the high-level store and randomly selected a store. When he was about to confirm the purchase, he suddenly shook his head and said, you still want to trick me? Dream on. System, it felt like it had acted for nothing just now. Buy. Buy your head. Every word I said just now is true. If there is even half a lie, the former sect leader will write his surname backwards. Write your head backwards. 6 million artificial spirit stones were definitely not comparable to 2 million natural spirit stones. So Jun Changshao was very willing to throw all of them into the spirit stone machine. The disciples could receive a fixed amount of spirit stones every month, or use contribution points to exchange for them. Therefore, the mission pavilion was crowded with disciples. They all rushed to exchange for spirit stones to help themselves break through faster. This also greatly stimulated their enthusiasm to do missions. After all, the spirit stones allocated every month were limited. If they wanted more, they could only rely on the contribution points from completing missions. Monk. One day, Jun Changshao stopped in front of Du Nan, who was cleaning the inner courtyard, and said, "Have you figured out what I said earlier?" Amitba. Du Nan put his palms together and said, "This poor monk has been comprehending during this period of time, but I still can't understand what Benefactor said about cultivating the heart first and redeeming others first." "If you can't even understand this, don't think about redeeming others," Jun Changshao said. "I'm ashamed," Du Nan said. Jun Changshao said, "My sect of all times lacks Buddhist cultivators like you. Are you interested in joining us? We will provide food and accommodation." "Sorry," Du Nan said, "this poor monk has already entered Buddhism." "Okay then." Jun Changshao shrugged and said, "My Great Diamond Sutra can only continue to be stored and wait for a fated person to comprehend it." "Wait a minute." Du Nan's face changed in shock. Benefactor Jun just said, "Swish." Jun Changshao took out a secret book with the words Great Diamond Sutra written on it and seriously introduced it to the camera. The Great Diamond Sutra is one of the best Buddhist techniques in Buddhism. There is only one copy left in the entire Falling Star continent. It is a must-read, must-learn, must-cultivate, and indispensable thing for Buddhist disciples. Benefactor Jun, what did you say in the previous sentence? Okay then. One more sentence before that. My sect of all times lacks Buddhist cultivators like you. Are you interested in joining? Here. Jun Changshao threw the Great Diamond Sutra over. Du Nan hurriedly caught it and carefully opened it. He saw the words written on it: "When you truly integrate into the sect of all times and sing with me, I will give you the Great Diamond Sutra." Chapter 764. Name. Go Fugue. Jun Changshao raised his head and looked at Du Nan. "Should I call you Fugue in the future? Or your Dharma name?" "Dharma name." "Okay, Fugue." Pow! Jun Changshao stamped the seal, and the sect had one more disciple. And this was very meaningful, because the person who was recruited was a Buddhist cultivator. At this point, the sect of all times already had the sword Tao, blade Tao, evil Tao, devil Tao, and Buddhist Tao. Patriarch. Du Nan, this Great Diamond Sutra, no rush, no rush. Jun Changshao said, "When you make a great contribution to the sect in the future, I will definitely give it to you." "How can it be considered a great contribution?" Du Nan asked. Jun Changshao handed the broom to him, patted his shoulder, and said, "Your fellow disciples are all uncouth and can't do delicate work, so I'll leave the cleaning of the inner courtyard to you." "Can I refuse? The one who cleans the latrines is still missing, all right." Du Jie took the broom and said seriously, "This disciple will work hard." Therefore, this kind of person was the easiest to fool. As long as he brought him into the pit, he wouldn't even call himself a poor monk and would directly call himself a disciple. Looking at the purple king who wore red underwear all day, he still called himself I, he didn't even call me patriarch. However, this guy had also changed recently, and had a sense of identity with the sect of all times. It wasn't because of his family, nor was it because of food, but because a small fifth-rate sect had actually made a first-rate sect suffer. This was simply inconceivable. Recalling what Jun Changshao had told him about the human-demon combination in the prison cell, he couldn't help but think, such a promising sect, it should be very easy for this king to cooperate with it and make a great achievement. Shua. Jun Changshao lay on the chair in the study room, opened the cultivation technique pavilion, locked onto the Great Diamond Sutra, and muttered, although this kind of Buddhist martial art can be exchanged for only 66 books, it's not easy to find. It turned out that he wasn't bluffing, there really was such a supreme Buddhist mental cultivation method. Unfortunately, they could only look at it and not buy it. With the increase in the disciples' level, it's time to purchase some higher-level martial arts techniques. Jun Changshao stroked his chin and said. As of now, the 5 elements heavenly appraisal technique, crimson sky raging flame slash, and 7 mysterious sunglow break were the 3 strongest martial arts of the sect of all times. They were not inferior to a first-rate sect with a strong foundation. However, Jun Patriarch felt that it was too little. Because there were many disciples, there had to be many martial techniques. Only then could there be a variety of martial techniques. Jun Changshao did not wish for the tens of thousands of disciples to only know 1 or 2 high-grade martial techniques. How boring would it be if they kept repeating their moves when fighting with others? The system said, you want to change the number of words, right? Scram. The news that Jun Changshao had detained 4 half-sages from a first-rate and second-rate sect had not spread. Therefore, the outside world was still stuck on the fact that the sect of all times had occupied the Spirit Stone mine. This incident gradually faded away, and the Jianhu became peaceful again. On one hand, Jun Changshao was thinking about enriching the martial arts library of the sect, on the other hand, he was organizing the disciples to prepare for the difficult mode of the life-and-death secret realm. Phew! One day, the sound of a breakthrough came from the inner courtyard. Jun Changshao, who had just come out of the training tower in the back mountain, grinned and said, the Ning brothers are finally going to break through. Yes. Ning Duxing and Ning Duzue, who had been stuck at the peak of Martial King for a long time, finally found an opportunity to touch the level of Wu Huang. The breakthrough was just like that. It was effortless. All in all, the 2 had long been qualified to advance. It was normal for them to break through to the emperor level. At this point, Jiangye was the only one left in the sect of all times who used to be F4. He was so anxious that he banged his head against the wall all day long. Why was it the former F4? Because the sect of all times had 2 more elders, namely Ding Xingwang and Gongsun Haohai. They could now be called the 6. Great King Kong. Don't worry, don't worry. Elder Guk comforted him, it will happen sooner or later. As the 4th elder, he came with Wu Huang's cultivation when he entered the sect. It could be said that it was easy for him to say that. Jiangye felt so uncomfortable that he wanted to cry. He didn't have that much desire for cultivation, but as the first elder of the sect of all times, he was at a disadvantage in cultivation. This was really a shame to the patriarch's cultivation. Not to mention, only when his cultivation was higher could he find his lost sister. Jiangye wouldn't forget his original intention of joining the sect of all times. Whether Jun Changshao forgot this matter or not, he was also vigorously developing the intelligence agency. At present, the sect was already stronger than the Demon Fiend sect in terms of intelligence. Hall Masterly, on this day, Jiangye came to the Drizzle Hall again and said, is there any news? Li Luoqiu shook her head and said, you gave too few clues. It's too difficult to find her in the vast sea of people. Oh. Jiangye left dejectedly. Since the establishment of the intelligence agency, he would come to ask every day. Although he knew that there was no hope, at least there was hope. Patriarch. Li Luoqiu walked into the hall and said, there's something I must report to you. Speak. Jun Changshao said. Li Luoqiu said, I've found some clues about Elder Zhang's sister, but, she might already be gone, you didn't tell him? No. Li Luoqiu could see that Jiang Yi cared a lot about his lost sister, so even though she knew that there were clues, she didn't dare to tell him, afraid that he wouldn't be able to take the blow. Jun Changshao said, confirm it carefully. If the information is true, then tell him. After all, people live without joy and sorrow. Li Luoqiu left. But just as she walked out of the hall, she saw Jiang Yi walking down the stairs like a zombie. Whoosh whoosh. The dark clouds that shrouded the sect of all times finally couldn't hold it back any longer and began to pour down in a line. Jiang Yi walked in the outer courtyard with his shoulders drooping, letting the rain wash his body, letting the raindrops flow down his cheeks, touching his lips with a bit of bitterness. Unknowingly, he walked to the peak of the back mountain, then sat on a rock with his whole body wet. His hands were tightly clenched, his fingernails deeply embedded in his flesh, and traces of blood splashed down along with the rain. What happened to Elder Jiang? Li Fei, Tian Qi, and the others who went to the training tower were all surprised. Over the years, Jiang Yi gave them the feeling that he was very free and evil. They had never felt so depressed and dispirited before. According to the information obtained by the Drizzle Hall, your sister has been gone for many years. At that time, you should still be practicing martial arts, so. Jun Changshao walked over and said, some things can't be changed by hard work. I understand. Jiang Yi let out a slightly hoarse voice. He really understood, but he never wanted to face it directly. He used time and time again to ask and used time and time again to force himself to comfort himself with the fact that his sister was still alive, but it was very difficult to find her in the vast sea of people. He created a picture for himself in his heart. In the picture, there was Jiang Town, his old house, his sister, and his parents. That was a beautiful wish, but until it was pierced, all of his wishes were shattered. Jun Changshao used his aura to block the rain, then put a jar of old wine on the rock and said, although drinking to drown your sorrows is even more sorrowful, at this time, a man should drink to his heart's content and vent his suppressed emotions. Pa! Jiang Yi slapped away the mud seal, grabbed the jar of wine, and gulped it down. The rain and tears on his cheeks mixed into the wine, and the taste was sour, sweet, bitter, and spicy. The drink was also filled with joys and sorrows. Jun Changshao slapped away the mud seal, raised the jar of wine, and drank with him. At this time, the only thing he could do was accompany Elder Jiang to his heart's content and drink until he was dead drunk. After a jar of wine went down his stomach, Jiang Yi was already swaying. He threw the jar of wine away, pointed to the sky and cursed, damned heavens, why are you so cruel? Burp. Jun Changshao burped. Thinking about how he had transmigrated, his face flushed red as he pointed to the sky and cursed, damned heavens, why are you so heartless? Boom! Boom! 2 bolts of lightning fell from the sky, directly exploding below their feet. The two instantly sobered up, and said with a shiver, just kidding, just kidding. Chapter 765. The next day. After Jiang Yi woke up, he also broke through to Wu Huang. The whole process could be described as confusing. Even when he felt the unprecedented level and power, he was still wondering how he had broken through. The reason was very simple. The knot and burden in his heart were released in yesterday's painful drinking. God's help might also have played a little role. Sister. Jiang Yi stood in front of the bronze mirror and tidied his clothes. Looking at his handsome face, he murmured, I will live well for you and my parents. Creak. The door opened and he stepped out. The sun was warm after the rain. Jiang Yi stood outside the courtyard and closed his eyes, feeling everything in the world with his heart. He seemed to have been sublimated. Good morning, Elder Jiang. Good morning. Elder Jiang seems to be more handsome. Nonsense. When will Elder Jiang teach Wu Tang? I still have questions about martial arts waiting for you. Right now. However, When Jiang Ye saw Shengguan Xinyao also enter the Wu-Tang class, he hurriedly pulled Mr. Gu, who was passing by, and said, "No, no, I drank too much yesterday and have a stomachache. Mr. Gu, help me teach today." "Okay." Mr. Gu readily agreed. However, as soon as he walked into the Wu-Tang class, he saw Shengguan Xinyao sitting upright. He hurriedly ran out and shouted, "Come back. I'm leaving, I'm leaving." Jiang Ye pretended not to hear him and ran away. Outside the main hall, Jun Changshao saw that not only did he break through to Wu Huang, but he also recovered from his sad mood. The corners of his mouth rose into a smile. Birth, old age, illness, and death were eternal. The living should not be too immersed in grief. It was important to face the future with a better attitude. Patriarch Li Luoqiu came over and said, "I just received news that the previous investigation was wrong. The deceased is not Elder Zhang's sister." Jun Changshao said, "So she is still alive?" Li Luoqiu shook her head and said, "I can only confirm that the target is not the person I'm looking for. As for whether he's alive or not, I can't be sure." Jiang Ye had provided too little information, and the Starfall continent was so vast that it was like looking for a needle in a haystack to find someone who had been missing for a long time. "If we can't be sure, then there's still hope." Jun Changshao said, "Let's tell Elder Jiang about this." "Yes." Li Luoqiu called Jiang Ye over. After he heard the news, he was startled at first, then immediately became wild with joy. There was still hope. There was still a glimmer of hope. Hall Masterly Jiang Ye suppressed his excitement and said, "Please pay more attention. If there's any news, good or bad, please let me know." "Okay," Li Luoqiu said. Jiang Ye walked out of the drizzle hall. At that moment, he saw that the sky was even bluer. He was in a very good mood to see who was more handsome. The Life and Death Secret Realm CD had already cooled down. Most of the disciples began to gather at the entrance to challenge in groups, hoping to break through to a higher level. Lacking the wood element, lacking the fire element, all kinds of group chants were shouted, and the atmosphere was very harmonious. Core disciples like Li Qingyang and Xiao Ziji did not rush in because they were waiting for the Patriarch to call them to challenge the hard mode. Challenging the normal mode was already very difficult. Challenging a higher level mode would definitely be full of excitement. "I can't wait." Li Fei's eyes were filled with fighting spirit. Li Qingyang said, "The training mode this time is higher than before. When you go in, you must be extra cautious." The core disciples were all waiting for Jun Changshiao's call and were all actively preparing. Even Yi Xingqian and He Wudi were no exception. What the two of them were after was not excitement, but the instant after the excitement that would give them a pleasant feeling. 3 days later, Jun Changshao called the disciples over. This time, he was also very cautious when exploring the hard mode. He directly sent out 200 Martial King disciples, and even brought along Jiang Ye, the Ning brothers, and Gu Lao, the 4F4. Ding Xingwang and Gong Sun Haohao did not go, because Wu Sheng and Semi-Sage were not allowed to enter in the hard mode. "Let's go." At the entrance of the secret realm, Jun Changshao said in a clear voice. "Shua! Shua!" 200 Martial King disciples and 4 Elder Wu Huang walked in under his lead. The hard mode was really difficult. It was so difficult that the author didn't even have any ink to write. He directly activated the 10,000 words ellipsis escape technique and flipped through it. Who? In the illusory land of the third stage, Li Qingyang, Xiao Ziji and the others were lying on the ground, gasping for breath. Li Fei directly spread out his arms and said weakly, "We were almost finished." The camera panned back and could see that out of the 200 disciples who entered, after passing the 3 stages, there were as many as 80 people who were eliminated. However, he still passed. Other than those who were eliminated, all the participating disciples were rewarded with experience points and their realms had all increased by 1 stage. Jiangye, the Ning brothers, and Elder Gu had also broken through, but they were so tired that they could only stand on the spot and wipe the sweat off their foreheads. Hoo! Jun Changshao, who was at the front, held on to the green dragon crescent blade, his entire body emitting the aura of advancement, and he successfully broke through to the 8th stage of the Sword and Martial Emperor. For a genuine Sword Emperor to always fight with a saber, it was truly inconceivable. The main reason was that he didn't have any suitable swords. Although the True Yang sword was not bad, it was still a distance away from the green dragon crescent blade with special effects. Not to mention, the meaning of the Sword Emperor realm was that it could stack with martial arts and make one's strength stronger. Unless he used a trump card like the 10,000 swords returned to Sect, Jun Changshao would prefer to use a blade to chop, because it was simpler and more violent. Previously, when he chased after the semi-sage under the setting sun and slashed randomly, the feeling of the scene immediately came out. If he held a sword and slashed randomly under the setting sun, he might be thought of as a big sand sculpture. Although the hard mode was a success, so many disciples were eliminated in the 3 stages, it was still a failure. It didn't matter. With this experience, he would have enough confidence to challenge the hard mode next time. After all, now that he knew the root of the problem, it would be easier to fight again. Of course. Jun Changshao also realized a problem. The disciples' cooperation was impeccable, but they lacked a combination of martial arts, such as the 7 stars moon capturing formation of the Lily Saint sect. Especially in the Dragon-Tiger battle for hegemony, the first-rate sects all had formation-type martial arts, and when used, the power was quite terrifying. The system said, "The store is all-inclusive, there is nothing you don't have." Here it comes again. Jun Changshao finally couldn't take it anymore and opened the high-grade store. However, after looking carefully, he only found that there were high-grade sect protecting formations, and there were no martial arts type formations. The enemies are getting stronger and stronger, and the middle-grade sect protecting formation is obviously not enough. I can consider getting a high-grade one. Jun Changshao didn't hesitate and spent 10,000 contribution points to buy a high-grade sect protecting formation. This kind of higher-level formation was not only stronger in defense, but also covered a wide range. When it was all set up, the Iron Bone town at the foot of the mountain was also covered. In the past, the middle-grade sect protecting formation only protected the sect. Now that it covered half of the Iron Bone mountain, it was really amazing. High defense and high coverage meant high consumption. As long as it was activated once, it would consume 100 contribution points. So expensive. Jun Changshao was speechless. Back then, when the system had just been activated, the upper limit was only 100 points. Now, opening a high-grade sect protecting formation required 100 points, which meant, Jun Changshao stood in the main hall, took a puff of his cigar, and said calmly, "I have become stronger and richer." Chapter 766. With a stronger sect protecting formation protecting the sect, Jun Changshao felt extremely comfortable lying in the wooden tub and taking a bubble bath. Pa! Pa! Pasting the mask on his face, he patted it with his palm and leaned the back of his head against the wall of the tub, murmuring, "I must get a formation-type martial technique." Life and Death Secret Realm was the most direct and effective way to increase one's realm, but the difficulty was too high. There was no problem with the disciples' cooperation. If there was a fixed number of people to form a formation, it would definitely increase their combat power and make it easier to pass. Jun Changshao really had to seriously consider this problem. Because based on the recent situation, the Sect of All Time's disciples could only perfectly pass the simple mode in the Life and Death Secret Realm. Although the normal mode had a high clearance rate, it was inevitable that there would be casualties. Not to mention the hard mode, the Patriarch and Elder personally led the team and almost got wiped out. Although the simple mode and normal mode could be played repeatedly, the higher the level, the lower the experience points. Therefore, challenging the hard mode would inevitably become the mainstream in the future. If they didn't have the strength to challenge it, it would only be a waste of time. Therefore, to increase the overall strength of the disciples, they had to rely on formation martial techniques. Not to mention, there was also the hell mode. From the hard mode, Jun Changshao firmly believed that even if the secret realm didn't have a limit on the number of people in a team, sending all of the sect's top forces would definitely result in the team being wiped out. In this regard, Yi Xingchen had the right to speak, because he had experienced it himself. For that kind of saint-beast level existence, even if 10 Wuxia were to be transferred, they would still be sent to die. What was hell? It was the place that would make you collapse and despair. With Jun Changxiao's personality, he definitely wouldn't be satisfied with the hard mode. He had to challenge the hell mode. If the disciples' strength didn't increase enough, they definitely wouldn't be able to play it. Schwa. He opened the technique pavilion and looked carefully. Although there were all kinds of amazing martial techniques, they were all for individual use and there were no formation-type martial techniques. The system urged, go to the store. Okay. Jun Changshao said, Schwa. He finally made up his mind and boldly clicked on the mid-tier store. As a result, he was despised by the system. If you want to farm, go for the high-tier stores. What kind of hero is farming mid-tier stores? I'd love to, Jun Changshao said. There was a reason why he was so cowardly. It would cost him 10,000 contribution points to refresh the advanced shop once. The intermediate level was 100, and the advanced level had soared to 10,000. This kind of hundredfold increase left Jun Changshao dumbfounded. Of course, there was a reason why it was expensive. At least from the initial high-level store, the goods were still relatively good. There wouldn't be too many useless goods. However, Jun Changshao refused to play. If he used 10,000 points to refresh the intermediate merchant shop, he would be able to refresh it 100 times. If he was slightly lucky, he would be able to obtain a few useful items. He would definitely make a profit. Then go ahead, the system said. Who? Jun Changshao took off the mask and dipped his head into the water. After a very metaphysical prayer, he began his first refresh. Ding, a brand new product appeared. After looking at it carefully, there was indeed nothing useful. This left him with no choice but to buy a multifunctional massage chair and continue to refresh. Schwa. Schwa. After refreshing 4 times in a row, not to mention a formation martial skill, even a single martial skill was not available. This caused Jun Changshao to collapse. My luck value must be fake. Failure is the mother of success. Don't be discouraged, don't be discouraged. Continue to refresh. The system encouraged. Continue. Jun Changshao adjusted his state of mind and continued to refresh. The 6th time, he finally got something good. It was still the 2nd volume of the 7 Profound Rays of Light. 2, ha ha ha. 2, ha 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 ha. Jun Changshao jumped out of the bathtub with a schwa, holding the bath towel and waving it around. As the strongest martial skill in the sect, the 7 Profound Rays of Light was only a fragment of the 1st volume. Now that there was a fragment of the 2nd volume, it was definitely worth being happy about. This was because the more this martial skill was learned, the more light it would condense, and the stronger it would be. Moreover, according to the introduction, the complete version of the 7 Profound Rays of Light was a martial skill above the divine grade. Don't get excited. The system said, maybe there are a total of 999 scrolls. Fuck off. Jun Changshao opened the details, and when he saw that the price was 5,000 points, the corner of his mouth twitched. The 1st volume is only 1,000 points, why is the 2nd volume so expensive? I'll buy it even if it's expensive. Ding. The host has spent 5,000 contribution points and obtained the 7 Profound Rays of Light Remnant Scroll X1. It has been transported into the space ring. Ding! Sect contribution points, 439650000. The system said, I still have a lot of contribution points to help the host, do you want to release them all? Jun Changshao was not in the mood to answer him, and took out the second volume of the 7 Profound Rays of Light to look at. Similar to the first volume, whether it was the chants or the words in the secret manual, they all seemed to contain some kind of complicated profound meaning. He Wudi was the clearest about this kind of profound meaning, because it contained the secrets of the Holy Master Realm. As long as he could figure it out, his cultivation would definitely reach a certain level and advance a step further. Unfortunately, with Jun Patriarch's current cultivation, even if he felt that it was strange, he would not be able to touch it even if he used all of his brain cells. That's not right. He placed his palm on the secret manual and asked in surprise, why is it so warm? This kind of warmth was about the same as the body temperature. It was as if someone had stuffed it into their arms and warmed it up for a long time. Moreover, there was also a faint fragrance. Jun Changshao sniffed and said, is it the smell of roses? Previous chapter. Next chapter, boom. In a dark place, a deafening rumble rang out. A figure was pushed back by the force of the impact, only stopping after flying for several hundred miles. Wherever he passed, a long and deep trench was left in his wake. Buzz. The space slightly shook, and a graceful woman in black clothes wearing high boots appeared. Her beautiful eyes revealed a cold killing intent, and she said, where is my remnant scroll? Your Majesty. Didn't you keep the remnant scrolls close to your body? This subordinate. I've never seen it before. In the end, the martial artist's face was filled with grievance and despair. Previous chapter. Next chapter, boom. Previous chapter. Next chapter, boom. The woman in black began to bombard the sky and earth. The area immediately caved in for dozens of miles, and the pitiful martial artist's face was bruised and swollen, and he completely fainted. Damn it! The woman clenched her 10 fingers tightly together, and said with killing intent, don't let me catch the thief who stole the secret manual, or else I will break his tendons and bones, twisting him into a fried dough twist. Jun Changshao, who had just come out of the wooden tub and put on his clothes, suddenly shivered, and thought to himself, why do I feel a little cold? The system complained, soaking in the bath for 2 hours, how can you not be cold? Patriarch. Li Qingyang stood outside and said, Junior brother Su is back. Jun Changshao was stunned, so fast. Calculating the time, this brat had only left the sect of all times for 1 or 2 months. Could it be that he had already successfully infiltrated and stolen Lu Qianxian and Fang Lingyu's information? Patriarch. Just as he walked into the main hall, Su Xiaomua hurriedly stood up. His appearance did not change much, but he was slightly thinner. It seemed that he did not eat well. Fortunately, Lu Wanshi did not see him, or else she would be so distressed that she would cry. Jun Changshao sat down, and said, have you investigated thoroughly? Su Xiaomua said, I have already infiltrated the Taishan Xingzong, but I am only an entry-level disciple now, and am unable to infiltrate deeper. Then why did you come back? Jun Changshao asked. Su Xiaomua scratched his head, and said with a smile, I just happened to be given a mission to the southern Baron State, so I came over to take a look. What mission? Jun Changshao asked. Su Xiaomua said, they asked me to deliver a letter to the southern Baron State's Ding Yuan Holy Sect. Deliver a letter? Jun Changshao was stunned. For such a first-rate sect, letters were delivered. Even if it was not a high-grade spirit seal, there should at least be a messenger pigeon, right? Chapter 767. First-rate sects must have a higher level of information exchange channels. Letting Su Xiaomua run errands to deliver letters was one of the most common tasks of the disciples, and it could be considered a preliminary test. However, as soon as he sneaked into Taishan Xingzong, he was able to deliver letters. It could be seen that they also saw that Su Xiaomua's legs were good, and he was more quick-witted, so he was the most suitable for this kind of thing. Take it out for me to see, Jun Changshao said. Su Xiaomao hurriedly took the letter out of the space ring, but reminded, Patriarch, the letter is sealed by a formation. You must not break it by force, or it will be noticed by the elders of the Taishan Xingzong Formation Hall. It's not difficult. Jun Changshao said, Go, call Elder Zhen. Su Xiaomao's mouth twitched. At this moment, he had realized that the Patriarch had to crack the letter. Not long after, Zhen Dejuan walked in and understood the Patriarch's meaning. After careful observation, he said, Patriarch, this formation is only the simplest. Not only can it be easily broken, but it can also not be spied on by the person who set it up. Su Xiaomao immediately breathed a sigh of relief. As long as he was not discovered, he could continue to go undercover. Otherwise, there was no need to go back this time to visit the sect. Break it, Jun Changshao said. Okay. Zhen Dejuan was really clean and quick. In a short time, he broke the small formation on the letter. Jun Changshao took out the letter inside and saw that it said, The Demon Valley is about to open. Please prepare as soon as possible. Don't delay the time. The content was very short. There was no earth-shattering secret. However, Jun Changshao touched his chin and said, What is the Demon Valley? Zhen Dejuan said, This is a forbidden area left by the Demon Emperor. There are many martial arts resources such as secret manuals, spirit stones, equipment, and so on. It will be open to the public at a fixed time every year. Can we go? Jun Changshao said. Zhen Dejuan shook his head and said, The first and second-rate sects have jointly issued a statement that only designated sects can enter the Demon Valley. Other sects are prohibited from entering. Heh. Jun Changshao said, The Demon Emperor has already fallen, and the forbidden area he left behind has long been ownerless. What right does a first and second-rate sect have to deprive other sects of the right to enter? This was the reason why he hated those self-proclaimed righteous sects and clans. They had completely placed themselves at the highest point, using the appearance of an expert to point fingers at the other sects and order them around. Zhen Dejuan said, The Demon Man Valley is full of danger. If a sect without enough strength enters, it will often end in total annihilation. That's why the big sects strictly prohibit entry. Furthermore, he paused for a moment and said, Some people say that this may be a trap set by the Demon Emperor before he died. He wants all the major sects to jump into it. Although they can obtain martial arts resources in the end, they will also have to pay a terrible price. This is similar to the man who started the Age of Discovery. Jun Changshao pondered for a moment and said, If the sect of all times insists on going to the Demon Valley, will the first and second-rate sects stop us? They won't. Zhen Dejuan said, After countless bloody lessons, the strength of the sects is not above the second rate. Even if they are qualified, they won't dare to enter. Is it very dangerous? Very dangerous. Zhen Dejuan said with a serious face. Jun Changshao said, When you say that, I am really a little tempted. Zhen Dejuan's mouth twitched and said, Patriarch, I think this matter must be carefully considered. After all, it is not entering the life and death secret realm. If you fail, you will only be weak for a while. If you fail to enter the Demon Man Valley, it means death. Jun Changshao said, A real warrior dares to face death. A real warrior can only grow through wind and rain. Zhen Dejuan, when will the Demon Man Valley open? Jun Changshao said. This, Zhen Dejuan pinched his fingers and calculated, about 6 or 7 months. It's still early. Jun Changshao stuffed the letter into the envelope and handed it to Su Xiaomao. Don't waste time, send it over quickly. Yes. Su Xiaomao said weakly, Patriarch, can I leave after eating? He had not eaten the food cooked by junior sister Lu for a while. It could be said that he was worried and could not sleep at night. Now that he had come to the sect to take a look, it was mainly for this reason. Yes. Jun Changshao paused and said, by the way, what name did you use in Taishan Shengzong? This, Su Xiaoma scratched his head and said weakly, Go Sheng. Boom. Boom. There was a loud bang in the hall. In the cafeteria. Lu Wancher sat on the side, holding her chin and said, Senior brother, you have lost weight. Munch, munch. Su Xiaoma, with a big bump on his head, wolfed down all kinds of delicious food. At that moment, his soul seemed to have flown beyond the clouds. Gulp, gulp. After drinking a big bowl of soup, he wiped his mouth with his sleeve and said with a smile, Junior sister's cooking is still the best. The food in Taishan Shengzong is simply plain tea. Lu Wancher said, Junior brother, when you come back from being undercover, I will cook for you every day. I guarantee that you will be white and fat in a few days. After Su Xiaoma finished eating, he said goodbye to his fellow disciples and left the sect of all times. Lu Chanshan leaned against the door of the hall and said, Patriarch, if you have any questions, you can ask me directly. Why did you let junior brother Su take the risk to be undercover? Jun Changshao said, this kind of thing is actually a kind of test for him. Lu Chanshan frowned and said, it will be very dangerous if he is discovered. Jun Changshao turned to look at her and said, as the eldest senior sister, you can care about your junior brother. You have made a lot of progress. Lu Chanshan turned and left. Oh right. Jun Changshao said, I heard that the Demon Valley is about to open. I plan to take you inside to explore. Lu Chanshan stopped and said, the Demon Valley is very dangerous. If you don't have the strength of a second-rate sect or above, you will be doomed. However, if Patriarch insists on going, this disciple will comply. We will see. Jun Changshao said, I haven't thought it through yet. Su Xiaoma successfully delivered the letter to the Ding Yuan Holy Sect. Because of his fast speed, he was praised by the hall master of the Taishan Shengzong who was in charge of missions and transferred to him as a clerk. Go Sheng, you are good. You are valued so quickly. In my opinion, you will become an official outer disciple in a few months. He, I am just lucky. Unlike senior brother who has become an outer disciple at such a young age, it is certain that he will be promoted to an inner disciple in the future. Senior brother Zhang, don't move. How can I let you do this kind of thing? Let me do it. Su Xiaoma had fully regarded himself as a disciple of the Taishan Shengzong and tried to build a good relationship with the disciples who joined earlier to lay the foundation for further information. Hall Master Jin, this new disciple Go Sheng is good. He is a seedling that can be cultivated. An elder commented. Hall Master Jin smiled and said, Elder is right. Under normal circumstances, new disciples were not welcomed in big sections. However, Su Xiaoma used his cleverness to tell the world that as long as he was humble, he could build a good relationship with them. The path of being a spy was very dangerous. However, with this guy's thick skin and personality, as long as he was not discovered, he could definitely make a name for himself in the Taishan Shengzong. In the future, he could accidentally become a core disciple or an elder. Don't be surprised. It was really possible. Of course. Su Xiaoma had no interest in the Taishan Shengzong. All his performance was based on infiltrating the inner sect as soon as possible to obtain useful information and then return to the sect. He would eat Lu Wancher's food every day and chat with Li Fei and the others when he was not cultivating. 3 months later. The cooldown of the sect of all times life and death secret realm was restored. As usual, Jun Changshao organized 200 Martial King disciples and 4 elders to challenge the hard mode. Because of the experience, the pass was smooth this time. However, more than 10 people still died and could not get the full achievement. Now that I am a 9th grade sword and martial emperor, I am closer to reaching the peak and activating the epic mission. Another 3 months passed. Jun Changshao led the disciples to challenge the hard mode again. Although there were no casualties, the experience given decreased significantly. They did not break through to the peak of the Sword and Martial Emperor. This is more fucked up. Jun Changshao broke down. Patriarch. Li Qingyang said, "Are we still going to the Demon Valley?" "Of course." Jun Changshao said. During this time, he had thought it through. If he could pass the hard mode for the third time without any injuries, he would go to the Demon Valley. I don't believe it. How could the forbidden area left by the Demon Emperor not be able to pass the life and death secret realm? The system broke down. It's clearly because of the side mission that you are so active. When do we leave? Li Qingyang said with a burning gaze. Originally, he was the only normal person in the sect of all times. However, under the influence of Jun Patriarch, he gradually went from the path of seeking stability to the path of death. Prepare, prepare. Jun Changshao said, "We leave tomorrow." Yes. Chapter 768. The Demon Valley was located in the southern Barren State. According to the rules set by the major sects, it was the Dingyuan Holy Clan's turn this year. However, this sect had been a little depressed recently. Because they didn't want to enter the Demon Valley very much and didn't want to sacrifice a large number of disciples for martial arts resources. There were a lot of things in the Forbidden Land left by the Demon Emperor, but whether one could get more or not depended on one's luck and strength. Some sects often gained very little when they entered, and many of them died inside. For example, last year, a second-rate sect sent thousands of disciples and more than a dozen martial kings in. In the end, they only got a small number of spirit stones and ores, but more than half of them died. It was not worth it at all. In that case, why were the major sects so happy to go in? In the end, it was because there were a lot of high-level martial arts, weapons, treasures, and so on in the valley, which were really tempting. The Great Origin Sacred Sect was depressed. If they were lucky enough to obtain a sage-level martial art after entering, then they would have profited greatly. However, they were worried that they wouldn't obtain anything and would end up suffering heavy casualties in the end. The rules were set and it was their turn again. They had to go, so it was a little awkward. Some sects wanted to enter the Demon Valley, but they could only wait anxiously for their turn. The weaker sects didn't want to go, but they had to bite the bullet because of the rules. Patriarch, an elder of the Dingyuan Holy Clan suggested, just send 5 Wu Huang and 20 martial kings. Agreed. Many elders expressed their support. 5 Wu Huang and 20 martial kings could be considered a luxurious lineup, but it also required a huge risk because if there were any casualties, the sect would definitely suffer a great loss. After thinking carefully, the Patriarch of the Dingyuan Holy Clan decided, then we'll follow the first elder's suggestion and send 5 Wu Huang, 20 martial kings, and 500 disciples into the Demon Valley. However, just as this second-rate sect was about to set off with a large group, Jun Changshao had already rushed over with his disciples from the border of the southern Barren State. Their configuration was: the Patriarch had 9th-grade sword and martial kings, for elders of Wu Huang's level, and 200 disciples of martial kings. Over the past 6 months, Jun Changshao had ordered the Drizzle Hall to investigate the Demon Valley in detail, and he was certain that all the major sects had suffered heavy casualties when they entered and exited the valley. To ensure that nothing went wrong, he had directly sent a group of people to clear the valley without suffering any injuries. The lineup sent by the Paramount Sage sect could only be described as luxurious. The lineup sent by the sect of all times could definitely be considered extremely luxurious. On the way, Li Fei asked, "Second senior brother, how far is the Demon Valley?" "About 2,000 kilometers. Li Qingyang estimated. 7 Field said, "There are many powerful ferocious beasts or spirit beasts in the valley." Li Qingyang said seriously, "Not only that, there are a lot of them." "Really?" Upon hearing this, the gazes of Li Fei, 7 Fields, and the others instantly became heated. Although he had entered the life and death secret realm many times, failure did not mean death. Without excitement, entering the dangerous Demon Man Valley would definitely give him a different feeling. Under Jun Changxiao's tutelage, as well as their high cultivation, the disciples of the Sect of all times were really good at courting death. Each of them liked to jump around the edge of death more than the other. In short, if the upper beam is not straight, the lower beam will be crooked. Puchi. Puchi. In the sky, the Demon Ridge Black Eagle flapped its wings and flew slowly. Jun Changxiao stood on top of it and said, "Girl, why are you sulking along the way?" "No. No." Yao Menjing said. Since the Demon Man Valley was created by the Demon Emperor, Jun Changxiao would naturally bring her, who had awakened the innate demon body, over and look forward to obtaining opportunities inside. Patriarch. Yao Menjing whispered, "I heard from Grandpa Zhen that when the Demon Man Valley opens, there will be many big sects coming. I'm worried. I'll be discovered by them." Although the little girl was young, she gradually understood that she was a demon cultivator and was not accepted by the world. She was a big disaster. "Don't worry," Jun Changxiao said, "as long as you keep running the hidden cultivation technique, even the martial emperor will find it difficult to detect that you are a demon cultivator." This kind of martial arts technique, which Yiwudi brought from a high-level plane, was perfect in hiding one's cultivation and aura. As long as one did not release it actively, they would definitely not be discovered. Looking at the patriarch's back, Yao Menjing's originally nervous mood gradually dissipated, and a bright smile appeared on her face. At first, the little girl was resistant and afraid of Jun Changxiao, but as she got along with him over the years, she had gradually treated him as the most respected elder. Her senior brothers, who cared about her in every possible way, were also like family. Yao Menjing liked it very much and was willing to stay in the Sect of all times for the rest of her life. Even if she only saw her fellow disciples every day, she would feel extremely happy. Southern Barren State, Barren Land. Jun Changxiao had been here once and entered the tomb of the medical saint of all faces. However, the location he went to this time was more remote and desolate because the Demon Man Valley was hidden there. The Demon Man Valley was not a valley. It was an independent space that the Demon Emperor had opened up with a magical power when he was alive, and it began to open regularly thousands of years later. Saint-level experts could cross the void and achieve something similar to teleportation. Emperor-level experts could forcibly open up independent spaces. The reason why the 8 great martial emperors in the world rarely came out was that they all hid in the space they opened up to cultivate, until one day they could see through the mysteries of heaven and ascend to the upper realm. Swish! Swish! In the barren land, Li Qingyang and the others rode on the hurricane wolves and galloped, stirring up billowing dust behind them. Jiang Ye and the others flew in the air, following behind the black eagle of the Demon Ridge. Patriarch. Old Gu said telepathically, "We're almost at the Demon Man Valley." "Okay." Jun Changxiao responded. His spiritual senses had already spread out and he saw that at the end of the barren land, many people had already gathered. Judging from the aura they exuded, there were many King Wu and Wu Huang. It was rare to see experts on ordinary days, and they would probably only appear under such circumstances. Of course. As Jun Changxiao's strength and status in the sect continued to rise, encountering experts at the level of King Wu and Wu Huang had become the most common phenomenon. The experts of various sects gathered in the barren land also noticed a large number of martial artists approaching and turned their heads to look. At first, they thought it was the Ding Yuan sacred sect, but after seeing the gorgeous uniform, they were all stunned. Sect of all times. Why did that shameless junior bring his disciples here? A second-rate sect elder frowned. Why did he have to use the word shameless to describe them? It was all because of Jun Changxiao's repeated advertisements in the dragon and tiger battle for hegemony. The major sects not only remembered Li Qingyang and the other young experts with good strength, but also remembered him as the shameless patriarch. Recently, a place of spiritual energy recovery has appeared. The sect of all times forcibly occupied it and even made the Haoguang sacred sect and world-defying sacred sect suffer. They have some ability. A powerhouse laughed. In my opinion, those two sects are also cowards. If it were me, I would definitely bring people to southwest Yangzhou to ask for it. The second-rate sect elder said lightly. Don't let the Haoguang sacred sect and world-defying sacred sect hear this, or they will definitely blush because they did this. In the end, they did not succeed and even paid a lot of spirit stones. Puchi. Puchi. The Demon Ridge Black Eagle flapped its wings and flew over. Jun Changxiao's face was indifferent, but Yao Menjing was nervous. After all, there were powerhouses from various sects standing below. If they were discovered, don't think about it, don't think about it. The little girl tried to control her emotions and then kept running the hidden cultivation technique. After confirming that they were all in the patriarch and did not pay attention to her, she secretly breathed a sigh of relief. June Patriarch. A sect powerhouse said, "What are you doing here?" Jun Changxiao said calmly, "I heard that the Demon Valley is about to open. I came with my disciples, hoping to go in and explore." Chapter 769. When Jun Changxiao explained his intentions, the experts of the major sects were stunned. A fifth-rate sect actually wanted to enter the Demon Valley. Were they really not in a hurry to die and reincarnate? Many people subconsciously looked at the disciples of the sect of all times. Seeing that most of their auras were at the master realm, they secretly shook their heads and said, "Was this guy kicked in the head by a donkey?" June Patriarch. An expert smiled and said, "Entering the Demon Valley is not like playing house." Jun Changxiao said, "That's why I've brought 200 disciples with me this time." The experts present laughed. If the sects that entered the Demon Valley did not have many top forces, they would definitely send more than 1,000 disciples. Even so, there would be heavy casualties. Bringing 200 disciples was definitely sending them to their deaths. An elder of the sect said, "June Patriarch, some of your disciples are more outstanding. They will have a bright future if you train them well in the future. Why do you have to take this risk?" "If I have to give a reason, it's..." Jun Changxiao paused and said, "I'm willing." These words were very arrogant and deserved a beating. The experts of the sects who had intended to persuade him shut their mouths. "Humph." An elder said coldly, "What an arrogant junior." Although they looked down on the fifth-rate sects, they did not let the sect of all times enter. At least they had good intentions. After all, it was not that no low-level sects had entered before, but the result was that all of them were wiped out without exception. Jun Changxiao also knew. But at this time, he had to be arrogant and show off because only in this way could he provoke the major sects and let him and his disciples enter the Demon Valley. To put it bluntly, it was to show his arrogance and make the major sects hate him so much that they could not wait to send the sect of all times to their deaths. June Patriarch. An elder of the sect said, "The quota for entering the Demon Valley this year has been determined. If your sect of all times wants to enter, then wait until next year." Jun Changxiao said, "No, since I'm here, I must go in." The more they spoke, the more arrogant they became. The more the sects listened, the angrier they got. Some of them even secretly hoped that the Grand Cauldron Holy Sect would forfeit and give their spot to the sect of all times so that they could quickly send themselves to their deaths. Jun Changxiao's plan was effective, but it also had a negative effect, which was that it instantly reduced the sect's impression of the sect of all times. Shwa! Shwa! Right at this moment, streams of light flew over from afar, and a vast aura rippled in the air. The faces of the martial artists present changed slightly as they exclaimed, "Half Wu Sheng." Not long after, several streams of light stopped in the air above the crowd, and 3 sage-like old men appeared, their bodies emitting a faint chill. These three people are the three elders of Taishan Xingzong's elder hall. The leader is Lin Yuan, whose strength has reached half-step Wusheng, and has a certain right to speak in the sect. The other two are at the level of Wu Huang. After the three people appeared, the area suddenly became quite cold, as if it had turned from summer to winter. Half-step Wusheng from Taishan Xingzong is more powerful than the half-sages of Haoguang Holy Sect and world-defying Holy Sect in terms of aura. This is the foundation. The foundation from the top first-rate sect. Elder Lin. The powerhouses of the major sects cupped their hands in greeting. N. Lin Yuan nodded and looked at Lu Qianqian below. A trace of disappointment flashed in his eyes, and then he asked lightly, "The people of the Grand Cauldron Holy Sect haven't arrived yet?" "Not yet." Someone laughed. Taishan Xingzong is definitely one of the top forces in the Falling Star continent, so the major sects naturally have to be more active and enthusiastic. Elder Lin. An elder of a second-rate sect smiled and said, "Jun Patriarch of the sect of all times said that he wants to take his disciples into the Demon Cultivator Valley to explore." Lin Yuan looked at Jun Changshao and said indifferently, "The Demon Cultivator Valley is full of dangers. For sects below the second rate, entering is equivalent to courting death. Hurry up and take your disciples back." There was no doubt in his tone, as if he had already determined that the sect of all times was not strong enough. This made Jun Changshao very unhappy and said, "The Demon Emperor has fallen for thousands of years, and the forbidden area he left behind is ownerless. What qualifications do you have to stop the sect of all times from entering?" As soon as these words came out, the major sects were in an uproar. Just now, they just thought that this kid was just a little arrogant. Now that he dared to argue with the half-step Wuxing of Taishan Xingzong, he was just courting death. Lu Qianqian frowned slightly. She had cultivated in Taishan Xingzong and knew Lin Yuan's character. Patriarch's words were likely to anger the other party. Sure enough. A trace of anger flashed in Lin Yuan's eyes and said, "How can a fifth-rate sect like you question the qualifications of my Taishan Xingzong?" Jun Changshao shrugged and said, "You first-rate sects are awesome, this is undeniable, but what this seat means is that anyone can enter the Demon Cultivator Valley, and no one is qualified to stop them." Although Lin Yuan was unhappy with this junior's attitude, there were so many people present after all, so he suppressed his anger and said, "Jun Patriarch must enter the Demon Cultivator Valley?" "Yes." Jun Changshao said firmly. Lin Yuan said, "In that case, we should fulfill his wish." He looked at the various heroes and said, "What do you all think?" An elder said, "Since Jun Patriarch is so stubborn, we naturally have to fulfill his wish." Agreed. Agreed. The major sects expressed their opinions one after another. In fact, they couldn't wait for the Demon Cultivator Valley to open right now, and then let the sect of all times go in to die. No one objects. Lin Yuan looked at Jun Changshao and said, "When the Demon Cultivator Valley opens, Jun Patriarch can bring disciples in." "Thank you." Jun Changshao said lightly. He also knew that the major sects definitely didn't have any good intentions when they agreed to let him in. However, since he had already won the qualifications, he must go in and try. If he took away all the good things inside and didn't leave anything for them, it would be even more perfect. Not long after, the Patriarch of the Ding Yuan Holy Sect rushed over with a large force. "Patriarch Hao." Lin Yuan said, "The Patriarch of the Sect of all times wants to enter the Demon Cultivator Valley. Is your esteemed sect willing to give up this spot?" The Patriarch of the Ding Yuan Holy Sect was dumbfounded. A sect elder smiled and said, "Patriarch Hao, Jun Patriarch sent 200 elite disciples to the Demon Cultivator Valley this time. We must cooperate." 200 disciples. The corners of Patriarch Hao's mouth twitched. He had made a great decision to send out a luxurious lineup of 5 Wu Huang, 20 martial kings, and 500 grand-level disciples. Was the sect of all times not sending so few disciples in to die? In that case, Patriarch Hao said, there's no harm in giving up this spot to the sect of all times. Entering the Demon Cultivator Valley was a gamble. At first, he was a little reluctant. Since the newly risen sect of all times was a newborn calf that was not afraid of tigers and insisted on bringing 200 disciples to die, he would definitely be willing to give up the right to enter. It's settled then. Lin Yuan announced, the qualification to enter the Demon Cultivator Valley this year belongs to the sect of all times. Thank you for your support. This seat will live up to your expectations. Jun Changshao cupped his fists. The corners of everyone's mouths twitched. It seems that this kid didn't realize that everyone wanted him and his disciples to enter because they were actually looking forward to dying as soon as possible. Buzz. At this moment, the space in the originally desolate area suddenly trembled slightly, and then gradually cracked open and expanded infinitely, finally forming a circular vortex. Hoo-hoo, a gloomy aura whizzed out from the inside, and the martial artists of the various sects who were closer to it couldn't help but shiver. Although they had been here many times and had also brought their disciples in, they still couldn't help but feel fear every time they felt this demonic aura. The disciples of the sect of all times were fearless. When they saw the vortex appear, they all secretly muttered, "This is very similar to the entrance to the sect's secret realm." Jun Patriarch. Lin Yuan said, the Demon Cultivator Valley is open. Your sect can enter now. See you later. Jun Changshao cupped his hands and led his disciples in one after another. But just as Lu Qianqian was about to enter, Lin Yuan said lightly, your Taishian Ice Heart physique didn't come easily. Why do you want to die with them? Taishian Ice Heart physique. The faces of the martial artists of the various sects changed in shock. This physique was definitely the strongest among the ice attributes. Lu Qianqian stopped, her back facing the three Taishian Qingzong elders, and said in a cold voice, because I am a disciple of the sect of all times. You're tuning into the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.